Chapter 204. These generals were mostly brave warriors. Perhaps they wouldn't have any problems fighting on the battlefield, but when it came to strategizing, they were far too lacking. Xianxia lightly shook his head. He wasn't as straightforward as the other Mongolians. Instead, he was a cunning walla leader, as cunning as a rabbit. During the Battle of the Timu Fortress, it was because of his cautiousness and caution that they were able to achieve a great victory. Since the periodical king had already been defeated and even died, he naturally wouldn't recklessly advance. He wasn't very satisfied with the words of these martial artists. Instead, he turned his gaze to his younger brother, Borromeo. Borromeo and the periodical king were both Xianxia's younger brothers. However, their personalities were completely different. The latter was fond of grandiose achievements and liked to take everything for granted. However, he was a man of few words and usually gave off a gloomy feeling. It wasn't that Borromeo wasn't good at talking. On the contrary, he was a person who planned before taking action. He was used to observing others and then making the most correct decision based on everyone's performance. However, those who were good at observing others generally had very accurate intuition. When he felt Xianxia's gaze on him, his expression became serious. Elder brother, this subject brother also thinks that General Nigong and the others are right. Our current advantage is that we have a strong army. As long as we take a steady approach, taking down the Great Ming's capital will be just around the corner. How do we take a steady approach? Xianxia, who valued his younger brother's opinion very much, asked. In the words of the Han people, it's called step by step. Obviously, Borromeo had already thought of a countermeasure. When his elder brother asked, he gave the answer without hesitation. Step by step? Xianxia was very interested in this idea. Tell me in detail. Yes. In fact, the method is very simple. In order to prevent the Great Ming's defeat from happening to us, we can take a divided approach. That is, one army will be at the front, one army in the middle, and one army will be at the back. This way, no matter which army is attacked, we can look after each other and support each other. If we don't encounter any attacks along the way, we will enter the Great Ming Dynasty's capital in batches. Remember, don't learn from the king of magazines. Don't stop, just focus on attacking. If there's really a problem, just turn around and retreat. The army behind you will naturally support you. Not bad, not bad. Xianxia nodded in agreement when he heard Borromeo's opinion. By dividing the army into 3 groups, it was guaranteed that no matter what went wrong, Walla's main force would still be there, and the army would not be completely wiped out. Xianxia laughed heartily when he realized the benefits of the art of war. Alright, we'll do as you say. How about this? General Nigong will take 10,000 men as the vanguard, that child Borromeo will take 20,000 men as the center, and this chief will bring up the rear to ensure everyone's safety. Yes. After receiving the order, the generals placed their right hands in front of their chests and saluted Xianxia. There was a change in the strategy. The Walla army that was supposed to arrive at the capital at dusk on the second day did not arrive as scheduled. On the contrary, the Security Bureau personnel sent out ran until 3 horses died and sent back important news. The Walla army was actually advancing toward the capital in 3 groups. In the mercenary compound, Yang Qindong, Commander Leng Song, and the others were waiting for news from the front lines. This time, the main force of the Walla army was coming. It would be very difficult to use the previous method of naming to deal with them. This time it would be a hard battle of saber against saber, spear against spear. Emperor Zhou Xian had already sent people to inquire about the situation more than once. Even eunuch Jin Ying had taken the initiative to come once. Because of Yang Qindong's presence, he left after a brief exchange of greetings. Leng Song had told him before that it was best not to let the loyalty marquis know about their deal. Otherwise, based on the fact that this person had an extremely good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was very likely that he would interfere and ruin the plan. Of course, this was Yang Qindong's idea. Even his cooperation with Zhou Xian had to be as mysterious as possible. In his view, the more mysterious something was, the more people would believe it was real and would not be suspicious. As expected, Jin Ying listened to Leng Song's words. When he saw Yang Qindong here, he took the initiative to leave. Before leaving, he gave Leng Song a look that only the two of them could understand. Yang Qindong had seen this out of the corner of his eye, but he still pretended not to see it. While everyone was waiting, the Security Bureau finally sent back news. When they learned that the Walla army had not gathered together and had instead divided into 3 groups, Yang Qindong wanted to throw his head back and laugh. Previously he had been worried that the Tile army would launch a collective attack. If that was the case, with the 10,000 Great Ming soldiers under his command and the 400 Cold Vanguard soldiers, it would truly be difficult to ensure the safety of the 12 gates of the capital. As for going out to look for opportunities, the difference in numbers was too great. It was difficult to say whether they could protect themselves and annihilate the enemy. Since he was leading the army into battle, if he only wanted to win, his expectations were too low. What Yang Qindong wanted was a complete victory. He wanted to obtain the greatest victory with the least losses. It was indeed very difficult to achieve this. However, now that the Walla had taken the initiative to divide their forces, the situation was completely different. After dividing their forces, the Walla's advantage in numbers was gone. Yang Qindong could fight according to his plans. He strode to the sand table and looked at the three-dimensional map that was almost engraved in his mind twice with his bright eyes. He suddenly pointed at a place called Willow Town and said, "It's here. Let's encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements." Encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements? Lung Song and the others were all excited when they heard this. Their eyes flashed. Yang Qindong had once introduced encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements in the tactical learning class. This was an effective method to annihilate the enemy. It would only be used when the enemy's numbers exceeded a certain level. When everyone was still thinking about the essence of encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements, Yang Qindong took a pointer and pointed at the sand table and said, "Everyone look, this place is called Willow Town. The local people call it Willow Ditch. There is only one main road in the town that runs from east to west. The north and south sides are filled with huge ditches. There was a heavy rain a while ago, so there should be a lot of water in the ditches. Immediately send people there. If the ditches in the north and south are filled, immediately inform the people there to evacuate." With a resolute voice, Yang Qindong gave the military order. At the same time, Tiger's Mane had already walked out of the meeting room and arranged for fast horses to investigate the situation in Willow Town. "When the scouts come back with the specific information, we will hold a meeting overnight and then make preparations overnight. We have less than 24 hours to prepare. I hope everyone will be alert." Yang Qindong's gaze swept across Lung Song, Xiaofeng, Tingshan, Wuxia and the others. Yes. Everyone's bodies quickly tensed up and stood at attention. At the same time, their eyes lit up. Generals were never afraid of war. Although they also hoped for world peace, their mission made them never shrink back when war came. In their hearts, they even hoped to achieve great things on the battlefield. The scouts left the city in the night. Now that the 5 city warden departments were under Yang Qindong's command, it was very easy to send people out of the city. 4 hours later, the fast horses came back from Willow Town, which was 30 li away. They reported that the ditches were filled with water, and that the ditches were 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep. Inform Vice Commander Yang Qindong and the 5 commanders to come here for a meeting. Hearing that the situation was as he had expected, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with determination. Not long after the order was given, Yang Guang's group of 6 arrived at the mercenaries' courtyard. This was the first time they had walked in here, so they were a bit nervous. After all, to the outside world, this army was too mysterious. It was so mysterious that even they did not know much about it. The dark night added a bit of mystery to the courtyard. The 6 people followed the torches that led them to the meeting room, so they did not see their surroundings clearly. When they entered the brightly lit meeting room, the 6 people lost their ability to observe their surroundings. All of this was because Yang Qindong, dressed in green, was standing in front of them. Ever since the previous time when he completely defeated Walla's vanguard, Yang Qindong had the title of War God. He enjoyed a very high status and influence in the army. After this matter, Tao Jin, Yang Jia, Mao Fusho and Gao Li all regretted it. They originally thought that with a war on the horizon, staying in the capital to maintain law and order was a very safe job. If the situation turned bad, they could immediately escape from the capital. But who would have thought that the defeated Great Ming army would be able to display such power in the hands of the loyal Marquis? This was great. They had defeated the enemy effortlessly and obtained military merits, but they didn't get any credit at all. Their hearts were extremely unbalanced, so they made up their minds that they would participate in the next war no matter what. When they saw Yang Qindong, a feeling of respect naturally flowed out from the bottom of their hearts. "You're all here." Looking at Yang Guang's group of 6, Yang Chendong nodded slightly. His gaze then landed on Tao Jin's group of 4 as he asked, "Everyone, the battle is imminent. It's better if you each lead some men to guard the city and maintain law and order." "Oh no. When Tao Jin's group of 4 heard that they were going to be excluded again, how could they be willing? They immediately shook their heads like a rattle drum, and their faces instantly became very ugly. "So you're saying that you want to participate in the war?" Yang Chendong asked with a surprised expression. In fact, this result was already within his expectations. Since there were benefits, who would stand by and do nothing? Chapter 205. Yes, we want to join the war. Tao Jin and the other 3 held their chest high, as if they were using their actions to tell Yang Chendong that they were men, and they were also the young generals of the 5 cities' warden's office. Seeing that the 4 of them were so determined, Yang Chendong nodded his head. "Since you want to join the war, Marquis can agree to it. But there is one thing that needs to be emphasized. On the battlefield, no matter who it is, they must obey military orders. If anyone disobeys, they will be punished by military law and beheaded without mercy." Yang Chendong spoke seriously, but Tao Jin and the other 4 were even more serious. They nodded their heads solemnly, indicating that they would listen to Yang Chendong's orders and arrangements. "Since that is the case, come over, I will announce the battle plan." Yang Chendong turned around and walked towards the sand table. He held a pointer in his hand and pointed at the sand table as he spoke of the battle situation and issued orders. According to the scouts, Walla's army is divided into 3 groups and is heading towards the capital. The first group is a vanguard of 10,000 cavalry, led by General Walla's grandfather. Marquis has seriously studied this man. He is a man who is not afraid of death. His personality is straightforward and he kills without blinking an eye on the battlefield. But usually this kind of person will not beat around the bush. If Marquis did not guess wrongly, he will definitely take the shortest route to the capital tomorrow. Then Willow Town will be his only route. Willow Town, there is only one road from east to west. There are more than 2,000 people and more than 500 families in the town. The south and north of the town are surrounded by 2 ditches that are 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep respectively. It can be said that once we enter the town, as long as we block both ends, there will be no other way out. And what we need to do is to block them here. "Tingshan Tao Jin Gaoli, where are you?" "We are here." The 3 people who were called out stepped forward and came in front of Yang Chendong. Marquis ordered that Tao Jin and Gaoli each take 1,000 soldiers. "Tingshan, take 100 men from your 3rd company and set up a defense at the exit of Willow Town. Remember, your mission is to block the enemy here and not allow them to advance even an inch. At that time, you may be able to suppress the enemy's charge with long-range shots. Yang Jia, Mao Fushou, each of you will lead 1,000 men and cooperate with Xiaofeng's company of 100 men. When you see Walla's vanguard cavalry enter Willow Gully, you will immediately close the gap. This will restrict a portion of the enemy's forces and reduce the pressure on our allies. At the same time, you must prevent the enemy from breaking out from here. Sun Tong, take 1,000 men and cooperate with 4th Company Commander Wu Sheng. Wait for Walla's main force, which is that child Boromeo's troops, to send reinforcements to Naigong. No matter how fierce the attack is, you must not take a step back. When Xiaofeng, Yang Jia and Mao Fushou stabilize the situation, they will come to support you. No need, we can handle it." Wu Xing stepped forward confidently. He looked as if he could complete his mission and didn't need anyone's help. It's good to be confident, but don't feel too much pressure. Also, when you can't hold on any longer, there will be orders for you. At that time, you can retreat to the side and open up a path for that child Borromeo. Let him enter Willow Gully and become a turtle in a jar just like grandfather. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with Wu Sheng's performance. As a soldier, one must have the spirit of fighting for the sake of thousands of people. Otherwise, one wouldn't be an outstanding soldier. After patting Wu Sheng's shoulder and having him back down, Yang Chendong's gaze fell on Leng Song and Yang Guang, who hadn't been named yet. Your mission is to restrict Walla's leader, Yes Hen. No matter what, you can't let them advance too smoothly. Yes Hen is a very cunning and suspicious person. As long as he senses danger, he naturally won't recklessly advance. Once the time is right, I'll give the order. All you need to do is lead the army and charge over. When that time comes, you'll have done a great service. Yes, Leng Song and Yang Guang confidently replied. They had absolute faith in Yang Chendong. Since this was his order, it naturally couldn't be wrong. Okay, the order has been given. Is there anyone else who doesn't understand? If there isn't, immediately return to the armory and get a strong bow. Remember, other than cavalry, don't even think about engaging in close combat with the enemy. Just attack from afar. After assigning all the tasks, Yang Chendong calmly waved his hand. Although his blood was boiling at this moment as a commander, he still needed to maintain his cool. This sort of performance would play a vital role in calming the soldiers. With this order, the army immediately began to get busy. What should have been a peaceful night in the capital was now bustling with activity. The army needed to prepare for battle and leave the city. Such an important matter had to be reported to the emperor and approved. Yang Chendong gave this task to Sun Tong. Marquis Yang, this general really didn't do it on purpose. When eunuch Jin sent someone to find me, I truly had no other choice. Sun Tong saw that Yang Chendong had given him this task and hurriedly tried to explain. He did not want to offend Yang Chendong because of this, as this would only bring him benefits. It's fine. Marquis knows of your difficulties and can understand. There's no need to think too much about it. Yang Chendong had a smile on his face, but it was just a formal smile. No one knew what he was thinking behind this smile. No, Marquis Yang, this general truly admires you. I have already regretted what I did before. This time please send someone else. Sun Tong kept shaking his head as if he wanted to express his determination. Yang Chendong stepped forward and placed a hand on Sun Tong's shoulder as he chuckled. Okay, Marquis understands your intentions. How about this? You still need to report. This time it is Marquis who has asked you to go. It will be different from last time. This smile was much more sincere than before, and Sun Tong immediately nodded in understanding. Although one did not have a very high position in the Five Cities Warden's office, one still needed to be smooth and slick in dealing with people, and one also needed to be smart. Satisfied, Sun Tong left and headed straight for the Imperial Palace. Not long after, Jin Ying heard the news and met with Sun Tong. She heard about Yang Chendong's plans and determination for this battle. Is the main force of Walla's army coming? Commander Sun, what do you think are our chances of winning this time? Jin Ying did not know much about the battlefield. He did not even know where Willow Town was. However, he was better than Wang Zhen in that he would not casually interfere in things he did not know. For example, when it came to military matters he did not understand, so he would ask for the opinions of others. I am not very sure either, but looking at the Marquis of Loyalty, he should be very confident. At this moment we should choose to believe in him. Sun Tong did not dare to directly express his admiration for Yang Chendong, so he changed the way he spoke. Yes, we should believe in him. How about this? I will immediately report this matter to the emperor. You wait for the tiger tally. Jin Ying nodded and told Sun Tong to wait where he was. He then went to the back of the palace to find the emperor. It had to be said that Zhu Qiu was very diligent. He had not yet slept and was still reading some books that the emperor must read. When Jin Ying went forward and said that Yang Chendong was going to lead the army out of the city to fight Walla, his expression became somewhat nervous. Has Walla's main force arrived so soon? I wonder if the Marquis of Loyalty has made preparations. Your Majesty, with the help of the mercenaries, I think there will be no problem. Commander Sun Tong of the Warden's Office of the Five Cities has come to ask for your opinion and ask for the Tiger Tally to lead the army out of the city. Your Majesty, what do you think? Jin Ying asked carefully. The political power of the Ming dynasty was actually composed of civil and military officials, eunuchs, and the embroidered uniform guards. According to the rules of the past, when the army went out to war, there must be an accompanying eunuch to supervise the army. Only then would the emperor be at ease. However, this obviously did not work for Yang Chendong. Last time he had refused to accompany the emperor, and the emperor had also agreed. If they were to send an eunuch this time, would the other party think too much? However, if there were no eunuchs accompanying him, if he handed over the tiger tally so easily, the emperor would not even have the strength to fight back once he had other thoughts. What are you looking at? Since the Marquis of Loyalty is going to deal with Walla's army, just give him the tiger tally. Don't worry, Yang Chendong is the youngest son of Lord Yang Rong. He won't do anything to me. Zhu Qiu clearly saw Jin Ying's worry. However, he had his own plans. In his opinion, Yang Chendong was a little unique in his way of doing things, but he should not have any thoughts about the throne. Otherwise, when he saved Ingzong, he could have held the emperor hostage and ordered his vassals. However, he did not do so. Now he would not do something like rebelling. Since the emperor had said so, Jin Ing could only nod and agree. However, for safety's sake, he still said, "Your Majesty, why don't I personally go and see how the Marquis of Loyalty is preparing? Is there anything I can help with?" "It's good. Then you can go." Zhu Qiu thought that sending Jin Ing was a form of attaching importance to him, so he nodded and agreed. Following Sun Tong, Jin Ing arrived at the courtyard where the mercenaries were stationed. When he saw Leng Song here, he merely nodded as a greeting. This was what the two of them had discussed before. In front of Yang Chendong, they would try their best to pretend that they were not familiar with each other to confuse him. How could he know that this was just Yang Chendong's idea? He wanted to give Jin Ing hope and let him feel that he had a chance. This way, the mercenaries and himself would be safe and they would be able to reap more benefits. "Marquis of Loyalty, is the army going to fight Walla?" After entering the meeting room, Jin Ing asked knowingly. "That's right. It has already been arranged. We're just waiting for your Majesty's tiger tally." Yang Chendong nodded and directly asked for the tiger tally. He had no intention of explaining the battle plan to Jin Ing. Chapter 206. It was one thing for Yang Chendong to not have eunuchs as supervisors when he led troops into battle, but he couldn't even be bothered to explain the battle plan. This made Jin Ying's expression turn ugly. "Duke of Loyalty, how are we going to deal with the Walla this time? Do you have a chance of winning?" Jin Ing kept asking for the battle plan. Although it was no longer a secret, Jin Ing had the right to know. If he knew, it was the same as the emperor knowing. But Yang Chendong couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. He still remembered that before he returned, it was this man who had ordered the brocade guards to attack Yangjia village. Yang Chendong didn't settle the score with him because he cared about the big picture. But it didn't mean that he would still speak nicely with him. Thus, in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the others, he turned around and said, "This marquis has spoken for an entire night and my mouth is already dry. If Eunuch Jin wants to know the specific situation, you can ask someone else." Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the others' expressions changed when they saw him reject Jin Ing in front of everyone. This was the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, the favorite of the emperor. Wasn't Yang Chendong afraid that Jin Ing would hold a grudge against him and settle the score later? Tao Jin and the others couldn't help but lower their heads, indicating that they wanted to draw a clear line with Yang Chendong. Yang Guang stood unmoving. Sun Tong looked conflicted and hesitant. But in the end he raised his head and looked at Jin Ying's deflated expression. Yang Chendong took in everyone's expressions out of the corner of his eye. Then his gaze landed on Jin Ing. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. His smile was playful. At this moment Jin Ing was furious. Ever since Zhu Qiu had come to power, no one had dared to speak to him like this. Even the current emperor would talk to him in a negotiating tone when he encountered something. However, Yang Chendong actually dared to openly oppose him. This was simply challenging his authority. Jin Ing was furious, but on the surface she did not show any signs of anger. Instead she laughed and said, "Fine. Since the emperor has handed over military power to the Marquis of Loyalty, there should not be any problems. In that case, this duke will congratulate the army in advance on their triumphant return. This is the tiger tally. This duke still has to go back and report to his majesty, so I won't stay any longer. Farewell." After saying that, Jin Ing turned around and left. No matter how one looked at it, her footsteps were somewhat unsteady. It was clear that she was extremely angry. But at the same time he still had a backup plan in his heart, which was that he did not know the details of the battle plan. If they lost the battle, it would have nothing to do with him. At that time he could use this as an excuse to punish Yang Chendong. What Jin Ing didn't know was that Yang Chendong would give her this opportunity. Because of Yang Chendong's attitude towards Jin Ing, the atmosphere in the meeting room was extremely tense. Yang Chendong acted as if he didn't see it and said, "All right, go do whatever you need to do. The tiger tally has already arrived. The army will set off in an hour." Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the others quickly left. They needed to collect their weapons. It would take some time to gather their men. Leng Song and the others all stayed behind. Each of them only brought a company of soldiers so they could be called to battle at any time. Without any outsiders, everyone's spirits were much more relaxed. Lung Song also carefully came to Yang Chendong's side and said, "Young master, Jining is quite angry with you, but I don't know why she did this. Didn't you say that the group of eunuchs could always influence the great Ming Emperor's thoughts?" This was not only Lung Song's confusion, but also everyone's confusion. Even Tiger's Mane, who had been by Yang Chendong's side all this time, had a puzzled expression. These days the sixth young master had been polite to everyone. Why did he suddenly turn hostile tonight? Seeing everyone's confusion, Yang Chendong laughed loudly and said, "You don't have to worry about the young master's safety. With you all here, who would dare to touch this young master? As for tonight's actions, they were originally intentional. I wanted to show my dislike for Jining and let the world know that this young master doesn't like the group of eunuchs." "Why is that?" everyone asked again in confusion. "The people's hearts." Yang Chendong pondered for a moment and didn't answer immediately. Instead, he paused for a moment before spitting out these two words. Ever since the defeat of the Tumu fortress, everyone knew that the eunuchs had ruined the great Ming dynasty's plans. They had caused so many soldiers to die tragically on the battlefield, and so many officials to die without even leaving behind their corpses. This caused the common people and some officials to hate the eunuchs to the bone. Yang Chendong didn't give Jining any face and did it in front of so many people. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before this matter spread out. Even if these people didn't say anything, they would use the security bureau to spread the news. In this way, everyone would know that the loyal Marquis wasn't afraid of the eunuchs. This was tantamount to giving everyone a glimmer of hope. Letting those people who hated the eunuchs to the bone find a leader would allow him to win the hearts of the army and the people in a very short period of time. These might not be of much use in the political struggles of the upper echelons. But once it was time to explode, it would definitely be a force that couldn't be underestimated. Yang Chendong's goal was to replace the great Ming dynasty peacefully. The hearts of the army and the people were the most important issues to be resolved. As for the officials and eunuchs, as long as they were given enough benefits, they wouldn't be a problem. This was the true reason why Yang Chendong didn't give Jining any face. In the end, he was setting up a trap. It was just that he had set it up too early so others couldn't see its effects. He only mentioned the people's hearts and didn't give any further explanation. Yang Chendong looked at Lung Song and the others and said, "This battle concerns the safety of the great Ming dynasty's capital and the image of this young master. Do you have the confidence to win this battle?" "Yes." Lung Song and the others stood at attention, their faces full of confidence as they replied, "Very good. Since that's the case, you can go and make your preparations. Lung Song, stay behind." Yang Chendong waved his hand at everyone. Xiao Feng, Ting Shan, Wu Sheng and the others quickly left to mobilize the people before the battle. Lung Song, who was left behind, looked at his young master expectantly. "Go. The two of us will leave the city first. There are some things that need to be arranged in advance." Looking at Lung Song, Yang Chendong smiled confidently. He wouldn't tell others that he had a large warehouse. He could take out many heavy weapons at any time. Thus, he left Lung Song alone to make arrangements for this matter. The old man had an impatient personality. Ever since he received the order from Yeshen, he had been rushing toward the great Ming dynasty's capital without stopping. In just one day he had arrived at Willow Town, which was 30 li away from the capital. "General, we've been hurrying along the way. Both men and horses are tired. Should we rest here for the night first? When the sun rises tomorrow morning, we'll go straight to the great Ming dynasty's capital." A trusted aide looked at the lit villages and towns in front of him and suggested. The grandfather shook his head and arrogantly said, "There's no need. Let's rest in the town first and then we'll launch a night assault on the capital. We'll catch the enemy by surprise. Haha, the merit will definitely go to this general." Since he had taken the role of the vanguard, he naturally had to make achievements. Otherwise, wouldn't he be ridiculed by others? As for the success rate of the night attack on the great Ming dynasty's capital, he didn't consider it at all. In the battle of the Tumu fortress, what he saw was the scene of the defeated army of the great Ming dynasty being killed and captured in groups. At this moment, he didn't put the strength of the great Ming dynasty's army in his eyes at all. In order to reach the great Ming dynasty's capital as soon as possible, the old man entered Willow Town as Yang Chendong expected. If it were other generals, in order to reduce unnecessary trouble, when they encountered an enemy town, they might be able to take a detour and not directly attack. But because of the Battle of Tumu Fortress, the Walla cavalry had long been arrogant. They didn't even put the elite army of the Great Ming Dynasty in their eyes, so how could they take the ordinary people of a town seriously? On the contrary, when they entered the town they could burn, kill and loot. How exciting and satisfying was that? However, when they really entered Willow Town, the situation was beyond their expectations. Although every house in the whole village was lit, they couldn't see a single person. When they broke in, they didn't find the existence of a living person, not even a chicken, duck or goose. When the old man who received the report of the battle heard that this was an uninhabited town, he sneered and said, "I didn't expect the Great Ming Dynasty to play the scorched earth game with us. It's just that their calculations are wrong. We didn't consume too much on the way here. Even if we can't replenish for a while, it doesn't matter. Humph. It's just that this method is really annoying. Come, inform everyone to eat some dry food here. After half an hour the army will set off." General Nai Gong didn't take the empty town in front of him seriously. This was a complete display of his arrogance. If it were any other general who was on guard, they would probably think carefully about why such a thing would happen. At least they wouldn't rest so comfortably in this town. Of course, General Nai Gong was also a brave general who had led troops for many years. During the rest time he didn't forget to send scouts to the front to inquire about information. But he didn't know that the scouts he sent out were destined to not return. They had completed their mission of going to the underworld to inquire about information. Nai Gong's army stopped in Willow Town and didn't leave. This gave Xiaofeng, Yongjia and Mao Fusho enough time to prepare. Seeing that the enemy had entered the encirclement, the 2,100 people quickly set up a defensive line on the west side of Willow Town. Each of them drew their bows and prepared to block the enemy's retreat. While Xiaofeng and the others were still preparing at the east exit of Willow Town, Tingshan had already begun his journey to harvest lives. Chapter 207. Xiaofeng, Tao Jin, Gao Li, and the other 2,100 soldiers were the first to enter the battlefield. With sufficient time, they even dug a simple trench for the soldiers to hide in. Just as they finished everything, the sky began to darken. Not long after, the sounds of people chattering could be heard in the distance. This was the sound of Walla's vanguard troops entering Willow Town. The enemy was right in front of them. In an instant, the 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office became very nervous. Some of the soldiers who were participating in a battle for the first time had their palms sweating profusely to express the anxiety in their hearts. This was how they should behave when they were on the battlefield for the first time. For some people, even if it was their second time on the battlefield, they would still be nervous. However, after 100 battles, they would no longer be nervous when they saw the battlefield. Instead, they would be excited. In contrast, the 100 soldiers led by Tingshan were very calm. They first used sharp military shovels to dig a hole in the ground to ensure that they could hide their bodies well. Then they set up the 95 style in their hands and aimed the crosshairs at the only exit from Willow Town that led to the capital. None of the 100 or so people spoke, nor did they make any extra noise. They gave off the feeling of ghosts in the night. Other than a faint shadow, nothing else could be seen. The lifelessness of the Lung Feng soldiers shocked the surrounding 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office. Among them there were some people who were quite skilled and thought that they were great. However, when they compared themselves, they realized that the gap between them and the soldiers was huge. Not long after the soldiers finished their preparations, 3 warhorses rushed out of the town and headed straight for the formation they had set up. From the looks of it, they were all lightly dressed. There was no doubt that they were scouts. Position 1, Position 2, Position 3, get ready to fire. Positions 4, 5, 6 and 6, prepare to fire at any time. Seeing the 3 enemy scouts charging towards his formation, Tingshan Company commander, who was leading the formation, only took a glance before losing interest. There were only 3 people and they were not even enough to fill the gaps between the teeth. He could just hand them over to 3 soldiers. The 3 people who were named immediately became excited. This was a kind of glory, but at the same time it was also a kind of test. Didn't you see that Company Commander Tingshan had arranged for other people to take the last shot at any time? If he really missed, he would lose face and the limelight would be stolen by others. If that happened, he wouldn't even be able to find a place to cry. The 3 soldiers closed their right eyes and aimed at the 3 moving targets with their left eyes. Their breathing gradually stabilized and their right index fingers gently placed on the trigger, preparing for shooting. Fight. When he estimated that the 3 enemy scouts were only 150 steps away from him, Tingshan softly spat out a word. Then 3 gunshots were heard. Bang, bang, bang. On the opposite side, 3 Walla scouts fell off their horses at the same time. F***CK. When the 3 of them fell off their horses, the warriors in positions 4, 5 and 6 cursed at the same time. This had nothing to do with quality. It was all because they didn't have the chance to shoot. It was just another kind of complaint. Looking at the warriors in positions 1, 2 and 3, they were all in high spirits. They almost laughed out loud when they saw that they had hit the target. At the same time, the soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty who were with them all widened their eyes in disbelief at this moment. The scene just now deeply stimulated them. They couldn't believe that a battle could be fought like this. From a distance of 150 steps in the dark, they could still accurately hit the enemy. What kind of method was this? Thinking about how they could fight side by side with such an army, the officials of the 5 cities' warden's office began to feel confident. Originally, they thought that it would be very difficult or even impossible to stop the enemy's cavalry of 10,000 with only 2,000 soldiers. As for the 100 mercenaries, they didn't take them seriously at all. What could such a small number of people do? However, when the truth was in front of them, they knew that they were wrong, very wrong. They were afraid that the combat power of these 100 mercenaries would not be much worse than the 2,000 of them. The 3 gunshots sounded so ear-piercing in the quiet night. Walla's army in Willow Town quickly moved. The general in charge of the town immediately shouted to his trusted aide, "It seems to be the sound of firearms. Go and see what happened." Although he suspected that it was the sound of firearms, the arrogant general still didn't think that the Great Ming army would have the courage to come out of the city and fight with him. They had received intelligence that although many of the nearby Great Ming Dynasty guards were sending reinforcements to the capital, distant water couldn't quench the immediate thirst. There were only 10,000 soldiers in the capital and most of them were second-rate soldiers. They were very easy to deal with. Such an army wouldn't have the courage to come out of the city and provoke him. However, thinking was one thing and reality was another. Not long after the general sent people to patrol the situation, another round of gunshots sounded. Then, in the small courtyard where he was resting, a trusted aide ran over with a nervous expression. "General, we found a large number of Great Ming army outside the town. They used firearms and strong bows to kill dozens of our warriors." The trusted aide fell in front of the general and said in a panic, "What? Great Ming army?" When he heard that there were Great Ming army here, Walla was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed heartily, very good, very good. This general thought that he would only start a massacre when he entered the capital. I didn't expect that he would deliver himself to my doorstep so quickly. Very good, pass down the order. Warriors, get on your horses and charge with this general. It was just firearms and strong bows. The general really didn't put them in his eyes. Not to mention that accuracy was not good in the dark of the night. Even if it was daytime, he had 10,000 cavalry. Why would he fear the Great Ming army? Whether it was firearms or strong bows, there was a limit to how far they could shoot. There was also a time difference when controlling them. With this, the Walla cavalry could charge forward. As long as they charged into the enemy's camp, it would be time for them to start a massacre and rampage on the battlefield. The general was very confident. Not only that, his Walla cavalry didn't take the Great Ming army in front of them seriously. Along the way, they had seen too many useless Great Ming soldiers. There was no one who could scare them. As expected of the elite cavalry, they quickly gathered together. However, because the road to the east of Willow Town was not wide, it was not suitable for a large number of cavalry to charge forward. Thus, the general personally picked 500 cavalry and let them be the vanguard of the vanguard to charge forward. No matter how much damage they suffered, they had to charge to the enemy's formation and create enough time for the rear troops to charge forward. The 500 cavalry obeyed the order and left. Like a gust of wind, they charged out of Willow Town and headed straight for the Great Ming army camp. At this moment, Tingshan and the soldiers of the 3rd Company were looking forward with bright eyes. They were ready to fire at any time. Beside them, the 2,000 Great Ming soldiers led by Tao Jin and Gao Li also pulled their bows and were ready to shoot at any time. After shooting down the first 3 Vol scouts, the enemy had launched another wave of attacks. More than 30 of them had been wiped out by the mercenaries from afar. Although the Ming army had released some arrows during this period of time, They all knew that it was just to scare people. None of the Wat's cavalry had been killed by the arrows. After being robbed twice in a row, Tao Jin and the others also wanted to perform well this time. Thus they gave the order early on. As long as the enemy cavalry entered the range of the shooting range, they did not need to wait for orders and could shoot arrows to kill the enemy. In the dark night they were waiting with a net. At this moment the air was filled with a kind of solidification factor, causing everyone's breathing to become heavier. The originally cold night was filled with a warm atmosphere. Within their sight, they could hear the sound of horse hooves coming from afar. Because there were too many cavalry, the ground was trembling because of it, causing every soldier's face to be filled with a dignified aura. They're coming out. In the hope and expectation, a large number of strong horses rushed out of Willow Town. There were also bursts of shouts and shouts. Those were the Walla warriors riding their horses. They wanted to rush forward at the fastest speed and kill the great Ming army. Prepare to shoot. The moment they saw the cavalry rush out of the town, Ting Shan, who was leading the team, gave the order to the soldiers of the 3rd Company. The distance of 500 steps was far beyond the effective range of the Type 95, which was 600 to 800 meters. If he gave the order to shoot now, it would be difficult for the bullets to hurt the enemy. However, this did not prevent him from giving the order to shoot. As long as the soldiers felt that they could kill the enemy, they could deal with it themselves. Every soldier carried a basic magazine, 300 bullets, to ensure that when fighting the Walla cavalry, the enemy would not be able to break through the defense line because of the lack of ammunition. Commander Ting Shan gave the order, and the momentum of the 100 soldiers of the Cold Vanguard suddenly changed. A powerful murderous aura spread out from their bodies. In the end, it formed a substantial cold air, causing the great Ming soldiers who were closer to them to feel a burst of coldness. Eo yo ho! The Walla cavalry made a charging sound that belonged to their race. Under the command of their masters, the strong horses quickly closed the distance between the two sides. 350 steps. 300 steps. 250 steps. They had already reached the effective range of the Type 95, but the soldiers of the 3rd Company did not shoot. It was obvious that their usual training was effective. Due to the lack of raw materials such as copper and iron in the arsenal of Crimson City, when the instructor taught the Cold Vanguard soldiers, the most common sentence was to save ammunition and try to shoot every bullet into the enemy's chest instead of shooting randomly. Chapter 208. Even though Lung Feng had brought enough ammo this time, he didn't want to waste any bullets. He gripped his gun tightly and stared ahead like an eagle, thinking about the best time to fire. 230 steps, 220 steps, 200 steps. When they reached 200 paces, which was the effective distance of 300 meters, the sound of gunfire suddenly became louder. In the dark night, it was as if a meteor shower had streaked across the sky, directly pouring down on the bodies of the Walla cavalry that was surging forward. Under the dazzling light of the fire, the Walla cavalry, who seemed to have seen hope, experienced what it meant to be in hell, and experienced what it meant to have nothing to live for, to have no hope in life. When the powerful bullets spun out of the barrel and drilled into their bodies in less than half a breath, many of the Walla cavalry were killed on their horses before they could even understand what was happening. Perhaps because the charging speed was too fast, many of the cavalrymen were already dead, but their bodies were still charging forward. Only after 2 or 3 breaths did they fall off their horses with a plop. Even when they died, they probably didn't understand what had killed them. The 100 Cold Vanguard soldiers followed what they had learned in their training, firing in a staggered formation. It was as if they had set up a net of fire, wiping out all of the Walla cavalry within the range of 200 to 150 steps. In short, other than the war horses, none of the Walla cavalry could get within 150 steps. This distance of 150 steps became an insurmountable barrier in front of the Walla cavalry. Behind the 100 Walla cavalry were Tao Jin and Gao Li's 2 soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. Originally, they thought that this would be a tragic battle, and some of the soldiers were already prepared to die for a righteous cause. But when they saw the Walla cavalry's sudden burst of power and the situation stabilized, they knew that this was not a battle but a massacre. That's right, a massacre. Not a single one of the cavalrymen was able to get within 150 paces. At such a distance, even if they wanted to shoot arrows, they wouldn't be able to reach the effective range and wouldn't be able to do any damage. The Walla cavalry's crossbows could not shoot over, and the 2,000 soldiers of the Great Ming dynasty could not shoot either. This scene caused Tao Jin and Gao Li's hearts to burn with anxiety. They were here to gain merit, not to be spectators. They wanted to kill the enemy, but the distance that a strong bow could shoot was limited. Even if they shot from such a long distance, they would still lose their accuracy. There was no difference between shooting and not shooting. Commanders, if you really don't have anything else to do, just bring some people to bring back Wala's healthy horses. These are all good things. Whether it's offered to the imperial court or sold to merchants, they are all military merits and silver. Ting Shan noticed the anxious mood of the two Great Ming dynasty commanders behind him, so he gave them a suggestion. The strong horses were in front. Without their owners, more and more of them gathered and began to hinder the Walla cavalry's shooting targets. If these strong horses could be moved away, it could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Tao Jin and Gao Li, who were originally worried that they had nothing to do, immediately smiled. Okay, we will immediately organize people to steal the horses. Oh no. It's to pick up the horses, hee. Since there was military merit and money to be obtained, and there was not much danger to their lives, why wouldn't they do such a good thing? At this moment, under the command of the two commanders, groups of Great Ming soldiers rushed forward under the moonlight and brought the tall and strong horses back to their camp. They also cleared the obstacles in front of the Walla cavalry to ensure that they could have a clear line of sight. At the same time, there were no obstacles after the bullets were shot, so they could better kill the Walla cavalry. In Willow Town, 1,000 Walla cavalry were sent out, but not a single one returned. Another 1,000 Walla cavalry rushed out, but only less than 200 people escaped. The results that were sent back made General Nai Gong turn pale with fright. He couldn't understand when the firearms of the Great Ming dynasty became so powerful that they could also play a role in sealing off the night. It was not that they had never dealt with the firearms of the Great Ming dynasty before. In the past, when Zhu Di was still alive, he took them to the grasslands to commit crimes. In the beginning, they were indeed intimidated by the firearms that could emit smoke and shoot iron bullets. But after many bloody battles, they also found out the shortcomings of the firearms. That was, they could only shoot one shot at a time. After that, it would take a long time to reload. When it was used again, the accuracy was extremely poor. It was far better to use a strong bow. Over time, such things no longer scared the Walla people. Only they dared to risk their lives and sacrifice themselves. They could break through the firearms of the Great Ming dynasty by paying a small price. After that, they could do whatever they wanted. How could it be like this time? 2 echelons of 2,000 people rushed out, but only 1/10 of them returned. What the hell is going on? Who can give me an explanation? Seeing that they had lost nearly 1/5 of their forces without killing a single enemy, General Nai Gong angrily roared at his subordinates. All the Walla generals lowered their originally arrogant heads deeply. They also couldn't figure out what was going on. They couldn't understand why the Great Ming army, which was originally weak, became so powerful that they suffered such a big loss. No one answered his question. General Nai Gong's emotions couldn't be vented. He was even angrier. Just as he was about to use the saddle to teach these disappointing subordinates a lesson, suddenly, a burst of gunshots came from the west side of Willow Town. It was like many firecrackers were set off. What's going on? The sudden sound scared General Nai Gong. He looked at the burst of fire coming from the west side of the town and asked angrily. Just as the words left his mouth, a young general quickly ran in front of General Nai Gong and knelt on the ground. General, a large number of Great Ming soldiers suddenly rushed in behind us. We were careless for a moment and more than 500 people were killed or injured. This was a Walla Chiliarch who was in charge of covering the rear. Usually his task was the simplest and safest. He was only responsible for checking if there were any soldiers who escaped because of the battle. But today they were suddenly attacked. They were completely unprepared and were caught off guard. Half of the soldiers died on the spot. The rest reacted faster and escaped into the town. General Nai Gong was in a fit of anger. When he heard the Kiliarka's words, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the Kiliarka's collar and pulled it in front of his face. What did you say? The Great Ming army attacked us from behind? How many people are there? I can't see clearly. It's too dark. The Chiliarch shook his head with an innocent expression. He couldn't be blamed for answering like this. It was really too dark. In addition, he was unprepared. When the gunshots rang out, a large number of his brothers fell to the ground. He only cared about running for his life. How could he have the time to see how many enemies were there? The Kiliarka's answer made General Nai Gong throw him to the ground angrily. Then he shouted to the other troops, "Who dares to lead the troops to the back and see what happened?" General Nai Gong in Willow Town was stunned. He originally thought that he was the one who took the initiative to attack. But reality told him that the Great Ming army was prepared. Now that he was the one who was attacked, how could he not be angry? Among the young generals, there was a brave Chiliarch who took the initiative to lead his troops to the west side of Willow Town. But when cold weapons faced the 9.5 spear that had a shooting range of nearly 400 steps, the result was obvious. After leaving behind a few hundred corpses, the slow ones all retreated. At this point, an unbelievable result was placed in front of everyone. General Nai Gong's troops were surrounded in Willow Town, which was not very big. East side of town. Ting Shan looked at the gunshots and flames coming from the west side of town. He was furious. Xiaofeng UF King bastard. It was no wonder that Ting Shan was so angry. According to the previous plan, only when they were facing the crazy attacks of the Walla cavalry would they send out a red signal to the sky. At that time, Xiaofeng's first company would poke the Walla cavalry from the back to distract them. At the same time, they would also reduce the pressure on their side. But now, Xiaofeng did not even wait for his signal. He directly poked the Walla vanguard from the back. How could Ting Shan not be angry? He was not satisfied with the fight yet. But the reality was already like this. Even if he was angry, there was nothing he could do. Ting Shan could only look at the east side of Willow Town, hoping that there would be more Walla cavalry who were not afraid of death. Maybe it was because the heavens knew the hope in his heart. A large number of cavalry rushed out from the east side of town, and there were still many of them. Using the shadows under the moonlight, a rough calculation showed that there were at least more Walla cavalry than the last time. Ah, very good. This grandfather is to my liking. He knows what the battalion commander likes and wants to die. Brothers of the 3rd Company, listen up. Check your guns and ammo. Make preparations before shooting. Seeing that the enemy did not show any intention of retreating because of Xiaofeng's actions, Ting Shan changed his frowning expression and laughed out loud. The 3rd Company's cold vanguard members were originally angry because Xiaofeng's 1st Company didn't keep their promise. However, when they suddenly saw that the enemy still charged out, all of their faces lit up with joy. They quickly checked the 95 shots and replaced it with a new magazine. Why did the Walla army still rush out when they knew that the Ming army was blocking them from the east side? This had a lot to do with their commander, General Naigong. Knowing that they were surrounded, General Naigong was not afraid. He knew that the Ming army only had about 10,000 people. He originally thought that they were waiting for him at the east side. If he wanted to rush over, it would be difficult. But the Ming army actually took the initiative to split into two. Wasn't this the same as splitting their limited forces? Even so, how many enemies could there be in the front? If he did not rush now, when would he? When he broke through the front line, wouldn't the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty be an undefended empty city? Wouldn't he be able to take it? Chapter 209. Naigong thought that he had seen through the weakness of the Ming army. Thus he gathered 3,000 cavalrymen and had them charge out from the front. 3,000 Walla cavalrymen surged forward. From afar they looked intimidating. At the very least, the Ming army led by Tao Jin and Gao Li trembled in fear. However, Ting Shan, who did not care about all this, had the opposite expression. His eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He waited for the enemy to enter the predetermined distance before he started shooting. Without needing anyone to give the order, all the Leng Feng soldiers started firing when they estimated that the enemy cavalry had entered their effective shooting range. Similarly, a dense net of fire enveloped the front. The cold vanguard soldiers guarding the center even switched their guns to burst mode. Often, a small group of cavalry would fall to the ground together with their horses after a burst of bullets. Naturally, this method of fighting could not kill one person with one shot. However, it had an absolute deterrent effect and disrupted the charging formation of the enemy cavalry. Under the dense gunfire, at least 1,000 Walla cavalrymen were killed in the charging path. However, this also bought them a distance of more than 100 steps. Just as they were getting closer and closer to the Leng Feng soldiers and were less than 40 steps away, grenades rained down on them like rain. Then a series of deafening sounds rang out. Following that, people shouted and horses neighed non-stop. A series of powerful grenades were thrown and completely shattered the enemy's fighting spirit. At the same time, countless people died. Those who were still alive immediately retreated. They no longer had the courage to charge. Phew! Tao Jin and Gao Li let out a long sigh. It had to be said that their performance just now was a little too weak. When they saw the enemy rushing in front of them, they actually forgot that they were still holding strong bows in their hands and could only watch helplessly as the enemy got closer and closer. Their legs began to go soft and their bodies began to tremble. It could be imagined that if the Lung Feng soldiers were not the main force in this battle, these 2,000 Ming soldiers would have been defeated. If they were not captured, they would have been killed. It could be said that these Ming soldiers had not received proper training for too long. They had forgotten what the battlefield was like. They had forgotten that a life-and-death battle relied on courage. Fortunately, the Lung Feng made a move at the crucial moment. He used the powerful grenades to destroy the enemy's morale and won another victory. Another attack had failed. The old man in the town was not discouraged. Instead, he patted his head as if he had suddenly realized something. It's all my fault. It turns out that the Ming army's main force is right in front. Seems like their weak point is behind us. Come on, gather the rest of the troops and charge out with me. After knowing that it was impossible to attack from the front, Nai Gong immediately changed his strategy and decided to leave the town from the west. He thought that he was very adaptable, but in fact he was just adding fuel to the fire. However, as the person in the game, Nai Gong had no idea. With the order, the remaining 6,000 Walla cavalrymen quickly gathered. However, because the path out of the city was not wide enough, only 1,000 cavalrymen could charge out at a time. As the leading general, Nai Gong took the initiative to stand in the third echelon, which was the third group to charge out. In Nai Gong's eyes, standing here was undoubtedly very safe. Once the first two factions had used up all their firearms, it would be time for him to go on a killing spree and show off his might. However, would that really be the case? Xiao Feng, along with Yang Jie and Mao Fushou's 2,000 Ming soldiers, was destined to teach Nai Gong a lesson. Everyone be careful. In a moment, the Walla cavalry might charge out from the west. At that time, we will attack when they are 300 steps away. Before that, I hope that Commander Yang and Commander Mao can play your roles. Lie in ambush on the two sides and shoot from afar. Don't worry about whether you can hit the enemy or not. Just shoot with the fastest speed and immediately retreat. Do you understand? Xiao Feng looked at the two commanders of the Ming army and used an unquestionable tone to give the order. Although they were not affiliated with each other, Yang Jie and Mao Fushou had seen how Xiao Feng had led the Cold Front Company into Willow Town and killed hundreds of Walla cavalry. In the army, the strong were always respected. With the scene just now, Xiao Feng's words naturally had more credibility. Furthermore, he was not asking them to go up and die. Why would they not agree? At that moment, the two of them expressed their agreement and quickly began to make preparations. They had made arrangements in advance. Just as the 2,000 Ming army went to the west of Willow Town, a large number of Walla army appeared. Release the arrows, release the arrows. After releasing the arrows, immediately retreat. When Yang Jie and Mao Fushou saw that the Walla cavalry had charged into the range of the bows, they loudly gave the order. Immediately, arrows rained down from the sky and landed on the Walla cavalry that was charging out of the town. The dense barrage of arrows rained down and hundreds of Walla cavalry were shot down. They fell from their horses, causing waves of chaos. However, even more cavalry charged out and headed straight for Xiao Feng, who was guarding the front. Xiao Feng, who was also holding the 95 style, had an excited expression on his face. He was the first to raise his gun and shoot, hitting a Walla cavalry that was charging over with a sword. This was like a signal that instantly pulled the attention of all the Cold Front Company soldiers. At that moment, hundreds of guns were fired at the same time. Bullets flew out from the muzzles and flew towards the charging enemy and the war horses that were relatively larger in size. Haha. Do you see, the Ming army here is indeed few in number. Follow me and charge. When he saw that the bows were flying all over the sky, but in reality they were not very accurate and their accuracy was greatly reduced, the leading Wei Gong thought that he had seen through the Ming army. He was immediately overjoyed and urged the army to quickly move forward. Just as the order was given, the second echelon of 1,000 Walla cavalry charged out, and there was a burst of firecrackers in front of them. From afar they could not see the situation in front of them clearly. They could only see streaks of fire that were like meteors flashing by. It was because they could not see the situation in front of them that the Walla cavalry at the back continued to charge forward, one after another, towards hell. The sound of the gunshots traveled very far. Around 15 li behind Wei Gong, they could faintly see the scene of red light flashing in the distance. Luckily this was a plain. If there was a forest in the way, it would be difficult to see the scene in the distance. The Ming army actually came out of the city to fight? Looking at the red sky in front of him, Borromeo quickly made a judgment and guessed that Wei Gong had encountered the Ming army. Based on the time that they set off, he did not think that Wei Gong would be able to reach the capital so quickly. Thus, there could only be one conclusion, and that was that the Ming army took the initiative to come out of the city. They wanted to catch them off guard. In the art of war, there was the saying of taking the enemy by surprise. However, the Walla were mostly cavalry. In a battle on a plain, their advantage was too great. The Ming army did not know this, so it was no wonder that they were defeated. Men, send down the order to speed up and gather with Wei Gong's troops as soon as possible. In order to not let Wei Gong take all the credit, Borromeo, who had always been cautious, was careless for once. This was naturally because the sky was dark, so no one could see what was happening in front of them. However, it was also because of Ing Zong and Shi Heng's repeated defeats, which caused the Walla to be arrogant and think that the Ming army could not withstand a single blow. Under the order, the 20,000 Walla cavalry increased their speed. In a few moments they had traveled 10 li. When they reached here, they could faintly hear the dense gunshots in front of them. They're here, they're here. When Battalion Commander Wu Xing and his 4 company brothers saw the Walla cavalry approaching from afar, they immediately became excited. Previously, they were worried that the Walla's main force would shrink back because of the unclear situation in front of them. Now it seemed that there was no need to worry. The excitement of Wu Xing and Leng Feng was seen by Sun Tong and Ming Jun, who were accompanying them. They were very confused. They couldn't understand. At most, there were only 1,100 people. How could they be so excited and happy when facing 20,000 enemies? Did these people not want to live anymore? Or were they too arrogant and did not put others in their eyes? Under the astonished gazes, Wu Xing and Leng Feng quickly checked the black firearms in their hands. Then they formed a small semicircle and crawled on both sides of the road to Willow Town. 100 against 20,000, Wu Xing would not be so arrogant as to fight hand-to-hand with the enemy. They adopted the battle strategy that Yang Chendong taught them. That strategy was to retreat when the enemy advanced, harass when the enemy was stationary, attack when the enemy was tired, and advance when the enemy retreated. In the process of the Walla army's advance, they would give the enemy the most effective damage. At the same time, the enemy would be annoyed and unable to do anything to them. The soldiers of 4th Company were divided into 3 groups by platoon. The first platoon was personally led by Wu Xing. There were a total of 4 platoons and they were also the strongest. They were responsible for blocking the Walla cavalry's advance. The second platoon was on the left and the third platoon was on the right. They were responsible for blocking the advance of the Walla cavalry. Wu Xing had just given the 3 platoon leaders their tasks when Sun Tong hurriedly walked over. Company Commander Wu, what can we do? You are responsible for following my platoon. Retreat as you fight on the road. Create a false impression that we are no match for the Walla cavalry. This will make them bolder and chase after us. That will be a great achievement. Wu Xing roughly explained the battle plan that he and young Master Yang Chendong had arranged. When Sun Chuanchu heard this military order, he was stunned at first. Then he understood what it meant and said, Company Commander Wu means that we should pretend to run away? Yes, something like that. But is there a problem, Commander Sun? Wu Xing thought that this understanding was not wrong. However, one kind of defeat was intentional and the other was genuine. He just did not know how the 1,000 Ming soldiers would perform. Chapter 210. No problem. Hearing that they were just pretending to run away, Sun Tong nodded firmly. If he had to lead 1,000 soldiers to fight against the 20,000 elite Walla cavalry, it would be impossible. But when it came to running away, there was no need to disguise anything. Everyone knew what to do, right? In fact, it was exactly so. When the 20,000 Walla cavalrymen appeared and displayed their majestic and powerful side, the 1,000 Ming soldiers actually displayed their inability to run away vividly. Before Wu Xing and Sun Tong even gave any orders, the 1,000 Ming soldiers began to collapse. This was not an act but a genuine fear in their hearts. In the end, what they showed was exactly what Wu Xing had predicted. It was even more realistic than what he had imagined. And for such an outcome to occur, it didn't seem to be as simple as acting. Instead, he really did run away because he was afraid. The Ming soldiers in front of them were defeated before they even made contact. When the Walla cavalry saw this scene, they burst into laughter. Then they charged forward without any fear. It looked like they wanted to beat the enemy when they were down. The Walla cavalry, who wanted to fight for glory, rushed out with more than 1,000 men. This was exactly what Wu Xing wanted. He was only leading a company and had limited military strength. In this situation, if the enemy had too many soldiers, he could only retreat in order to ensure that he did not suffer any casualties. But if the enemy only had 1,000 men, he was confident that he could defeat them. Use flag signals to give orders to the second and third platoons. Let them fight according to the previous plan. The first row of warriors will wait for the enemy cavalry to enter our shooting range. Let's kill them. There's no need to hold back. Wu Xing looked at the dust on the road opposite him and saw more and more enemy cavalry approaching him. He then gave the order to the cold vanguard soldiers. They could not wait, especially when they heard the gunfire behind them. The morale of the cold vanguard soldiers was high. They finally had a chance to perform well in front of the 6th young master. Of course, they did not want to miss this opportunity. As time passed, Wu Xing's 4th company, brimming with battle intent, finally came into close contact with Walla's 1,000 cavalrymen. When the distance between the two sides was less than 200 steps, and those with good eyesight could even see the shadows of the other side, Wu Xing decisively gave the order to open fire. For a moment, the 40-man team of cold vanguards spat out tongues of flame from their firearms. At this time there was no need to aim at all. He only needed to rely on his intuition to shoot at the black shadow in the distance. As the gunshots continued to ring out, sparks streaked across the sky like meteors. One by one, the cavalrymen fell from their horses. Many of them did not understand what had happened even until they died. 80 to 90% of the Walla cavalry in the first 3 rows were wiped out, which allowed the Walla cavalry behind to see the situation in front of them clearly. When a Walla Chiliarch saw that they had lost 20 to 30% of their troops, his eyes widened in anger and he shouted angrily, "Everyone, don't be afraid. This is the Ming army's firearms camp. As long as we can charge in, it's time to show off. Kill." After 200 to 300 of their men were killed, the Vara cavalry did not retreat. Instead, they charged forward, shouting their unique Mongolian language and chant. It was clear that they wanted to use the advantage of the speed of their horses to charge into the Ming army. Then they would start a massacre. The Walla cavalry was very fast and charged forward like a whirlwind. In the dark night, it gave people the feeling that dark clouds were pressing down on the city. If they were facing the Ming army this time, even if the Ming army was several times more powerful than them, they would still have a chance of winning. They would even be able to beat the Ming army until they covered their heads and ran away. Unfortunately, they were facing the Xianxia's new cold vanguard army, which was 100 times more powerful than them. Facing an enemy that was dozens of times more powerful than them, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they were excited. Raising the 95 style in his hand, Commander Wu Xing shouted, "Attack!" Not only on the official road but on both sides of the official road, tongues of fire also sprayed out, completely surrounding the Watts cavalry from afar in a fan-shaped formation. Bang bang bang. Under the sounds of gunfire, the pitiful Walla cavalry were like paddy fields swept by a hurricane. Plop 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 plop, they fell to the ground one by one. From afar, the sounds of men and horses being overturned could be heard. The cold vanguard never knew what it meant to be soft when facing enemies. They may have a soft side, but that side was only for their family and friends as well as the young master Yang Chendong that they were loyal to. As for other people, they were no different from animals. Hundreds of tongues of fire were fired, and only 1,000 Walla cavalry corpses were left on the official road. This vanguard army finally paid with their lives for their arrogance. When the child General Borromeo arrived with a large group of men, all he saw was a ground full of corpses and the stench of blood in the air. Report. The Ming army is retreating. There are about 1,000 of them and they are less than 5 miles away from us. The elite Walla army scouts quickly determined the situation of the Ming army from the traces on the ground and reported it to General Borromeo. When he heard that 1,000 of his elite warriors were killed by 1,000 Ming soldiers, Borromeo's eyes flashed with intense anger. He had a vicious side to him and people like him were the most vengeful. Since someone had slapped him, if he did not catch the culprit and punish him 100 or 1,000 times, he would not let it go. Order the army to advance. We must catch up to the Ming army and then kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. In his anger, Borromeo gave out the order to kill. When the Qianhu under him heard this, they immediately got on their horses and galloped forward. The Walla cavalry was determined to kill the Ming army that was 5 miles away. It was as if a vicious wolf had set its eyes on a sheep, opening its bloody mouth. However, it seemed that their teeth were not sharp. Facing the retreating Cold Front 4th Company, not only did they not manage to swallow their prey as they had expected, they even broke a few teeth along the way. It was a great loss. After a few charges they were beaten back a few times. After losing another 1,000 cavalry, the Walla cavalry had advanced more than 10 miles and was now 5 miles away from Willow Town. At this time Wu Xing's 4th Company had already met up with Xiao Feng's 1st Company. The soldiers of the two companies were naturally in high spirits. Tonight's battle could be said to be extremely satisfying. Everyone had obtained a lot of gains. Compared to them, the Ming army was far worse. Especially Sun Pe and the 1,000 Ming soldiers that followed the 4th Company. They carried out their mission very well, running all the way, acting very well. No. It should be said that without the 4th Company at the back, they would have already collapsed, or rather they would have already collapsed. After retreating 5 miles to the west of Willow Town, the 4th Company and the 1st Company met up, and they had more than 3,000 Ming soldiers. However, this strength was not enough to stop the charging Ming army. Borromeo's troops. In other words, the plan did not have any intention of stopping them. Instead, the Ming army started to retreat like the tide, leaving a path to Willow Town. Willow Town. Walla's vanguard general Nai Gong ordered his warriors to charge forward and back a few times. After losing soldiers, they finally knew the power of the Ming army that surrounded them. The original 10,000 people quickly became less than 4,000 people. They finally became well-behaved and did not struggle. Instead, they went from attacking to defending, preparing to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Without waiting for too long, Borromeo's troops entered Willow Town from the west. The moment he entered the town, he saw injured vanguard warriors everywhere. Borromeo was in disbelief. Was this still the vanguard army that did not put the heroes of the world in their eyes? This was exactly the same as the Great Ming army that was defeated in the Tumu incident. Finally seeing Borromeo, Nai Gong, a 7-foot man, was so emotional that he almost cried. With a plop, he half knelt in front of Borromeo, praising the strength of the Ming army and his failure to break out of the encirclement. Nai Gong was a fierce general and he rarely put other people in his eyes. Even though Borromeo was Yeshin's younger brother like the dead Sai Yanwang, he still did not put them in his eyes. For him to half kneel in front of Borromeo, one could imagine how big of a blow he had suffered, to the point where he could even give up half of his dignity. Is the Ming army really that powerful? After hearing his grandfather's description, Borromeo had a bad feeling in his heart. Along the way he had fought with the Ming army. Along the way he had advanced triumphantly and had not seen much resistance. However, when he thought about how only his own warriors had died along the way and not a single Ming army corpse, Borromeo felt that something was not right. However, he could not put his finger on it. Logically speaking, with his current military strength, even if the Ming army wanted to play some tricks, what did he have to fear? Not to mention that he had met up with Nai Gong's troops. Facing the encirclement of 10,000 Ming soldiers, what could they do to him? In the end, it all depended on strength. Without enough strength, even if you used tactics well, what could you do? Since when can seeing a sheep kill a wolf? Borromeo did not know. It was true that the Ming army was a sheep, but there was also a tiger working with them. Although it was only a cub, when it opened its mouth and bared its fangs, it was still very frightening. It could also swallow an adult wolf. Chapter 211. Report. We suddenly discovered a large number of Ming soldiers at the west side of the town. They are blocking our way back. A Walla scout ran to Borromeo and knelt on the ground, reporting everything he saw. Borromeo was still trying to figure out what was wrong when he heard the scout's report. His eyes lit up and he quickly figured out all the problems. But then his face was filled with disbelief. According to his thoughts, the Ming army wanted to surround him and Nai Gong's troops and then eat them all. But the report said that the army only had 10,000 people. Did they have the ability to do this? What was going on? Even if the report was wrong and the Ming army came to the capital, how could the Ming army, who had just suffered 2 defeats at the hands of Tumu and Shiheng, have such courage? Borromeo thought and decided to go to the west side of the town to take a look. General Nai Gong also had a face of disbelief as he followed behind Borromeo to the west side of Willow Town. 50 li away from Willow Town, Walla's rear army was resting under the command of their leader, Xian. In front of them were the 2 armies he sent out. This night Xian slept exceptionally well. After seeing the Ming army's main force destroyed, he didn't think that there was anyone who could threaten him. But what Xian didn't know was that at this moment, 800 steps away from his tent, Yang Qindong had already arrived. He stood on an inconspicuous small hill and used a night vision telescope to look down at everything in his camp. The layout of the camp is somewhat loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Yang Qindong slowly lowered the binoculars in front of his eyes. A gentle and confident smile appeared on his face. "Young master, should we inform them to move?" The tall Beta Persei, who was more than 8 feet tall, asked in a heavy voice. "Yes, use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move, hee. Yang Qindong nodded lightly. Now everything was going according to his plan. This made him feel like he was in control of the world. In fact, for this operation Yang Qindong did pay a lot. At least he took out a lot of good things from the warehouse. On the surface, the warehouse was a large military warehouse for the country. Not only were there some advanced weapons produced in the country, but there were also some weapons that were ready to be deployed. There were also some cutting-edge weapons that were collected from all over the world for self-research purposes. And now, all of this was under Yang Qindong's control. This time, in order to effectively attack the Walla's army and achieve his goal, he specially mobilized the FD-203mm towed artillery from the warehouse. The FGD-203mm towed artillery was the largest caliber field artillery developed by China. It was developed by the Northern Industrial Company. This system was mainly used by military-level combat units. It had a long-range, great power and high accuracy. It could be equipped with a variety of special ammunition. It was the backbone of long-range firepower. Although the artillery was dismounted, its range exceeded that of the same type of artillery in the United States and Russia, and it was given the title of Asia's first artillery. The FGD-203mm towed artillery was very cumbersome, and its mobility was not as good as other artillery. In addition, it was easy to expose the target and it was slow to retreat after being attacked. It was precisely because of these shortcomings that its development was eventually stopped. There was an FGD-203mm towed cannon in the warehouse, and it was displayed as an antique. This time Yang Qindong took it out. In addition to wanting to review the power of this cannon, he also relied on the fact that the warehouse only needed to place the cannon in one place, and there was no need for it to be moved. Also, this artillery had an effective range of 50 kilometers, and its lethality was very large. It was perfect for him to use in this battle. The FE-203mm towed artillery was taken out and placed in a hidden place. Yang Qindong didn't forget to bring Hu Mang and Lung Song's first platoon of the second company to the artillery. When they found the artillery, these experienced Lung Feng soldiers widened their eyes. The FG-203mm towed artillery was very powerful. It could hurt both enemies and oneself. Once such a heavy firearm appeared, Yang Qindong had always been very careful. He brought his most trusted subordinate Tiger's Mane with him so that he could be in charge of using the artillery. After handing the FGT-203mm towed artillery to Tiger's Mane, he did some simple operations and told the other cold front soldiers how to fire the artillery. He also told them in detail the exact location of the artillery. After that, Yang Qindong left a long-range radio communicator and arrived outside the Walla army camp. Looking at the sleeping enemy in front of him, he felt that it was time to wake them up. Use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move now. Let's hope he can hit more accurately. Yang Chendong said as he led the cold front soldiers in 2nd Platoon and 3rd Platoon of 2nd Company to retreat. After all, this was a cannon. There was a chance of accidental damage. If they were killed by their own artillery before they could hit the enemy, there would be no way to explain themselves. Beta Persei clumsily used the radio to contact Tiger's Mane. After telling him the 6th young master's intention, Tiger's Mane, who was in a mountain valley about 30 kilometers away, gave the order to fire the artillery with a serious expression. There were 2 FGT-203mm towed cannons in total. Under Tiger Light's command, Leng Feng's brothers, who had systematically and seriously studied artillery knowledge, began to operate the cannons in an orderly manner. They weren't very familiar with it. After the necessary procedures were carefully carried out, a golden artillery shell that could only be carried by an adult was sent into the barrel. Under Tiger's Mane's order, one of the FGT-203mm towed artillery cannons that had its coordinates adjusted by Yang Chendong let out a roar. After a sudden tremble, flames whizzed out of the muzzle and flew straight into the Walla army camp about 30 kilometers away. Most of the Walla soldiers were immersed in their dreams. This time they had gained a lot of benefits. Many of the soldiers' faces were filled with satisfied smiles. But all of this was interrupted by a deafening sound. Boom! A roar like a small earthquake sounded, and then the artillery shell landed in the Walla army camp, producing a huge flame that spread out from the center. The shrapnel of the bomb was like countless meteorites flying in the sky, piercing through one tent after another, producing bursts of wailing and howling. Not far away, Beta Persei and the others looked at the mushroom-like flames. Although they were prepared, they were still stunned. But soon this shock turned into worship, and their eyes fell on Yang Chendong, who was standing in the middle of them. At this time Yang Chendong was smiling. He was happy that he hadn't forgotten about his work. The artillery shell was still very accurate. This was also thanks to the fact that in his previous life, the country found more than a dozen artillery experts to train him for a month to complete a mission. At that time he was so busy that he didn't even have time to sleep. Looking at the results now, he felt that everything was worth it. Inform Tiger's Mane, adjust the target to the left and right and fire the second shell. Since the coordinates were prepared, Yang Chendong had nothing to be afraid of. He continued to give orders to Beta Persei, asking him to use the radio communicator to inform Tiger's Mane 30 miles away. At this moment the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Even the soldiers who were usually sleeping were awakened by the loud noise. Some of them, wearing simple pajamas, rushed out of their tents and looked at the mess in front of them. From time to time, they would rub their eyes to make sure that this was not a dream but reality. Just when everyone was still in a daze and wondering what was going on, the second shell fell as scheduled. The landing point was 50 steps to the left of the first shell. With another loud noise, some unlucky soldiers stood in the area of the bombardment. At that moment they successfully fulfilled their childhood dream and flew into the sky. But this was just a flash in the pan. Soon they fell to the ground under the influence of gravity. However, when he landed on the ground, there was not the slightest sign of life. The artillery fire in the dark night was dazzling and eye-catching. Yang Chendong and the others were enjoying everything in front of them as if they were watching fireworks. In contrast, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Leader Yeshen had already been awakened. He was wearing a cloak, and under the protection of the soldiers, he looked blankly at the balls of fire one after another. His lips were trembling and he seemed to be mumbling something at the moment. Yeshen was indeed stunned by the scene in front of him. He had never seen or even dared to imagine a scene so real in front of him, making him feel like he was in a dream. However, the cries of the soldiers were so real and the smell of blood was so thick. The cruel reality was telling him that everything was so real, and there was not the slightest hint of falsehood in it. "Leader, let's leave this place quickly. It's too dangerous here." A trusted aide watched as the flames that could devour lives fell around them from time to time. He was afraid that the next moment, it would threaten the safety of his master. Thus, he hurriedly reminded his master of the situation. "Wait, it stopped. Just as he instinctively wanted to nod his head and abandon the warriors who supported him, everything suddenly became quiet again. Although there were still fires burning and the screams of the soldiers were incessant, there was no more gunfire. The danger seemed to have gone away. Chapter 212. Report. Just when everyone was still trying to figure out what was going on. Just when they were not sure if the wrath of the heavens would descend again, a scout hurried to Zhou Xian and knelt on the ground. There was a trace of panic in his voice as he said, "Leader, there is a Ming soldier outside the camp. He said he has a letter for you." "Where is he?" When he heard that a Ming soldier dared to come to the camp, Zhou Xian's eyes narrowed. A boundless killing intent and anger rose from the bottom of his heart. "He is under the control of our brothers." The scout felt his leader's killing intent and did not even dare to raise his head as he answered. "Kill him." When his trusted aides heard that a Ming soldier was under control, they immediately shouted loudly. It was as if killing the messenger would not be enough to quell the anger in their hearts. "Wait a moment." Zhou Xian waved his hand lightly. "Let's see what is written in the letter first. Since he dared to come and deliver a letter, he must be someone who dared to die. Even if someone like him was killed, it would not be of much benefit to Walla. It was better to see the other party's intentions first and understand his thoughts before speaking." Walla took the letter and opened it in his hand. Immediately, the vigorous and powerful Chinese characters appeared in his eyes. The letter was written by Yang Chendong himself, and the calligraphy he had been practicing for a while finally came in handy. Leader Yeshen Junjian. This lightning was inevitable because of marquee actions. It is because Walla made such a big fuss and went against the harmony of the heavens. However, the heavens are virtuous. Marquis cannot bear to continue causing suffering and is willing to turn weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk. If you are willing, you can leave the city for a while. On the other hand, if the lightning continues, I am afraid that Walla's army will cease to exist. What choice do you have? Please think thrice before you act. Ming Dynasty's loyal Marquis Yang Chendong. There were not many words, but the purpose of the letter was very clear. According to the letter, the fiery light that could easily kill people was caused by Yang Chendong's actions. If he wanted to prevent such things from happening again, it was very simple. He just needed to leave the city for a while and he would know the requirements. Yeshen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he passed the letter to his trusted aides. After they read it, they immediately gave their opinions. Some people said that they couldn't go out. This must be the trick of the loyal Marquis, in order to trick the leader into going out to look for the killing opportunity. Others said that there was no need to be afraid of Liao Ming. Since they wanted to kill people, then they had to be prepared to be killed in return. Once the two sides met, they would not be far from each other. At that time, Walla's elite cavalry would slaughter everything. When Yeshen heard this, his expression changed again and again. When he saw the messy barracks as well as the countless injured subordinates, he finally said fiercely, "This leader wants to see what this loyal Marquis has to say. Men, gather 1,000 elite warriors and go out with this leader to meet him." Bringing 1,000 brothers, this was Yeshen's method of self-protection. He must meet with Yang Chendong. Apart from the fact that he didn't want to be hit by the huge power of the cannon, he also wanted to hear what the loyal Marquis had to say. It was easy to select 1,000 elite cavalry from tens of thousands of soldiers. After a while, they were gathered and followed Yeshen out of the camp. 3 miles away from the camp, Yang Chendong stood on a protruding slope and looked into the distance under the protection of Beta Persei, Qiu V's first guard team and 60 soldiers. "Young Master Yang Wu will be fine, right?" Beta Persei had a rare look of nervousness. When he thought of Yang Wu, who was sent to deliver the letter, his heart was filled with irritation. "Nothing will happen, you have to believe in this young master." Yang Chendong still had a confident look on his face. He believed that since Yeshen could stand out among the Walla generals, he was not a short-sighted person. When two armies fought, they would not kill the messenger, not to mention the threats in the letter. As long as they were not reckless people, they would definitely not do anything to Yang Wu who delivered the letter. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. Beta Persei's worry was not without reason. In order to comfort him, Yang Chendong added, "If Yang Wu and his brothers were injured by the enemy, then this young master will bury the entire Walla army with them. At that time no one will be left alive." His voice was so indifferent, without the slightest murderous intent or anger. But from this sentence, Beta Persei could clearly hear Yang Chendong's determination. He thought that for the life of one of his brothers he would bury the entire Walla army with them. Suddenly he was a little envious of Yang Wu. His own death in exchange for such a spectacular scene, it seemed worth it no matter how he looked at it. This sentence was not only heard by Beta Persei, but also by all the brothers who were protecting Yang Qindong. For some reason at this moment, they just felt a rush of hot blood in their bodies, making it difficult for them to calm down. It was as if they had to do something. In the midst of this restlessness, a group of troops came from not far away. It was not very clear in the night, but based on their instincts, everyone could feel that there should be a large number of people, at least 10 times more than them. Wallace troops had indeed appeared. At this moment, all the restlessness in the hearts of the Lung Feng's troops disappeared. This was the ability of a veteran of hundreds of battles. No matter what kind of emotions they had, once they entered a state of war, they would always be able to recover their body and mind to their best state in the shortest time possible. Young master, they're here. Yang Wu led the way, and after seeing Yang Qindong, he quickly rode over on his horse. In the process of approaching, the Walla army was considered to be well behaved. No one moved recklessly, and there was no sound of horses neighing. It was so quiet that it seemed like they were elites. Very good, thank you for your hard work. Yang Qindong chuckled, and then Beta Persei led a snow-white horse over from the side. Yang Qindong leaped lightly and landed on the horse. Then he moved forward. Young master. Yang Qindong's actions caused the Lung Feng's troops behind him to shout in unison. In response, Yang Qindong reined in his horse and stopped. He turned to the crowd and revealed a bright smile, saying, I believe that with all of you here, this young master will definitely be fine, right? No one answered, but they all nodded in unison. Their uniform movements showed the attitude of these Lung Feng's troops. They swore in their hearts that as long as they were still alive, they would never let the sixth young master's personal safety be threatened in the slightest. Ha ha ha. Seeing how confident the Lung Feng's troops were, Yang Qindong could not help but laugh to the sky. Then he slowly rode forward on his horse and shouted loudly, The Great Ming's loyal marquis wishes to see leader Yesen. Do you dare to meet him? Why wouldn't I dare? A similar shout came from the other side of the night. Then a strong horse leaped out of the troops and came forward. The distance between the two parties was less than 3 li. The place where they met was between the two parties. Then the two stopped 10 steps away from each other. Yesen leaped out on his horse with a grand aura. Of course, the reason he dared to do so was because he believed that this area was safe. However, he did not know that under the cover of night, the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad had quickly approached and completely included him in the range of being killed at any time. Yang Qindong and Yesen looked at each other. When he saw that the other party was looking at him seriously, he smiled and said, as expected of the leader of the Walla, Your boldness is admirable. You're too kind. The loyal marquis is indeed a rising star of the great Ming dynasty. You actually dare to meet me at such a close distance. Can be seen that you are also a bold person. Then tell me, what is this so-called heavenly lightning all about? Also, don't try to fool me with some nonsense about ghosts and gods. I have lived for so long and I do not believe in such things. I only believe in one thing, and that is myself and my own strength. Yesen wanted to gain the upper hand by a show of strength. He had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Only then did he have his current achievements and position. He did not believe that a scholar of the great Ming dynasty who was less than 20 years old and only knew how to read books every day would have any knowledge. As long as he could successfully suppress the other party, it would be easy to get the truth. Once he knew the truth, whether to talk or kill would be completely up to him. To Yang Qindong, it sounded like a joke to him that he was the first to come up and threaten him. If he did not want to keep Yesen to continue pressuring the great Ming dynasty and create enough space and time for his own development, he was afraid that there would not be this meeting at all. Instead, he would have directly dealt with Yesen. He had his own plan, so he did not touch Yesen. But now this person had other ideas. It was ridiculous to think about it. Looking at Yesen, who was still pretending to be angry, Yang Qindong shrugged indifferently. Marquis knows how to use divine techniques. If you don't believe me, then it's easy. I can make the thunder reappear in minutes. Do you want to try? She originally thought that she had seen through Yang Qindong's trick, but she didn't expect him to be so calm at this time. Her eyes couldn't help but become a lot colder. Don't try to test this chief's bottom line, or you will regret it. I will regret it, haha. As if he had heard the biggest joke in the world, Yang Qindong looked up to the sky and roared. Then he suddenly stopped. Then his right hand turned into a fist and gently pushed forward. This was a signal to Beta Persei behind him to fire. Beta Persei had been watching the sixth young master's every move. Seeing that he had made his move, he immediately used the radio station to call for Tiger's mane. Although he stretched out his hand, the thunder that should have appeared did not immediately appear. Xianxia was nervous at first, but his face soon relaxed. Let's see. Reality will expose all your lies. Boom. A loud noise came out and landed in the barracks behind Xianxia. The walla tent that had just quieted down was once again filled with cries and shouts. Chapter 213. The smile on Xianxia's face froze in an instant. Then it became very ugly. The sky thunder killed his loyal warriors. He glared at Yang Qindong and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you know that we are still negotiating?" Yang Qindong ignored Xianxia's roar. Instead he grinned and revealed a sinister smile. Then he switched to his left hand and gestured at the warhorse under Xianxia. As if to coordinate with this gesture, a bullet suddenly flew out from an unknown place and shot into his strong warhorse. The originally strong horse suddenly neighed in pain and fell to its knees with a plop. The sudden movement of the warhorse caught Xianxia off guard. He fell from the warhorse without any warning. Because he was quite skilled, he did not get his face covered in dust. He only staggered a little and his body tilted a little, but he quickly returned to his original state. With a push of his right hand and a tap of his left hand, Xianxia was no longer as unforgiving as before. He became much more obedient. However, the soldiers behind him did not know what happened. When they saw their leader fall from the warhorse, they thought that something bad had happened. Suddenly, 5 strong horses rushed out and leaped straight at him. "Fall all of you." Since he wanted to establish his might, he naturally wouldn't give the other party a chance. Under Yang Qindong's angry roar, the Ghost Shadow Sniper team ambushed behind him took action. The 5 warhorses were locked in an instant. Only half of the way forward they fell to the ground one by one. With night vision goggles and advanced sniping techniques, Bai Zhuo and his team members had complete control of the small battlefield. Above, seeing that 5 of their own warriors had fallen, the other Vala people were still shouting in disbelief. However, they were the first to react quickly. They turned around and gathered their chi in their dantian, shouting loudly, "All of you stop. Without my orders, no one is to act rashly. Otherwise you will be punished by military law." Xianxia was really scared. He was frightened by Yang Qindong's gesture. He could not see what the other party did, but his men died one by one. Could it be that he really knew some kind of magic? Xianxia, who had doubts in his heart, quickly analyzed that Yang Qindong did not mean to kill him. Otherwise, why would he talk so much nonsense? If he pointed at him, wouldn't he die on the ground like the other Walla cavalry? Since he knew that Yang Qindong did not want to kill him, he was calm. First he stopped his men from acting rashly. Then when he looked at Yang Qindong, his tone became much gentler. He even asked with a hint of respect, "Tell me, what do you want? I don't think you want to kill me, right?" "That's right." Yang Qindong clapped his hands as if he was praising Xianxia's understanding. However, this slap gave him a fright. He instinctively tensed up his body and prepared to defend himself at any time. It was as if he thought that this slap was some kind of demonic technique. Yang Qindong did not ridicule Xianxia's loss of composure. Instead he said in a calm tone, "In the eyes of Marquis, your life is the same as the other Walla people's lives. It is not worth a penny more. Therefore Marquis has no need to kill you. This time I asked you to come out to talk to you about the Walla army retreating." "Retreating?" Xianxia was puzzled. "Yes, it's retreating. Of course, if you don't retreat, Marquis also has the ability to kill all of you here, just like in the Tuma Castle. Although you have fewer people, you still managed to kill 500,000 soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty." Yang Qindong knew what the other party was suspecting. It was nothing more than the lack of military strength, so he casually gave an example. As soon as he heard about the Battle of the Tumu Castle, Xianxia's face showed a proud expression, but after he understood what Yang Qindong meant, his face changed instantly. "Do you think you can be like our Walla warriors and win with fewer people? What? Do you think the effect of the heavenly thunder is still not enough? If that's the case, then Marquis doesn't mind a few more." Yang Qindong saw that Xianxia still wanted to get lucky. His face changed immediately and then he slowly raised his right hand again. This action made Xianxia's expression change. "Wait, I believe you." Xianxia couldn't help but be nervous. The effect of the heavenly thunder was too powerful. A casual strike could kill hundreds and thousands of people. If such a heavenly thunder struck again, he was worried that Walla's morale would be destroyed. If that was the case, how could they still talk about dominating the Great Ming dynasty? Yeshen finally became obedient, and Yang Qindong naturally withdrew his right hand. How is it? Do you agree to retreat? I agree. This chief will order the entire army to retreat. Yi Xian said in a somewhat dispirited manner. This time he had come full of confidence, but he returned in disappointment. If it was anyone else, their expression would not be good. Oh no. Who knew that when Yang Qindong heard that the whole army should retreat, he shook his head. We have to retreat, but not like this. Marquis remembered correctly. In the Tuma castle you should have captured a lot of Ming dynasty soldiers. Now send them back. If there is one less person, you don't have to go back. What? Are you threatening me? When he heard that Yang Qindong wanted all the captives, Yeshen's expression changed. He widened his eyes as if he was going to fight for his life. Yang Qindong, who had already controlled the situation, acted as if he didn't see Yeshen's so-called fierce face. Marquis is threatening you. What? Are you not convinced? If that's the case, Marquis doesn't mind using the heavenly thunder to destroy you. After that, Marquis will lead the army into Walla. When that time comes, not only will the Great Ming dynasty's captives be taken back, even the women and children of Walla will become the Great Ming dynasty's captives. Do you believe me? Yang Qindong said without showing any weakness. These words were like thousands of needles piercing Yeshen's heart, making him unable to refute. If it was someone else who said this, he might laugh out loud and give the order to kill them. However, these words came from Yang Qindong's mouth. Thinking back to the various actions just now, he was really worried that the other party would do this. In the face of such a powerful heavenly thunder, could the Walla cavalry really withstand it? While Yeshen was still thinking about how to deal with it, Yang Qindong continued to speak. Marquis only asked you to return the captives. He didn't ask for the gold and silver that you robbed. This is already extra lenient. Furthermore, in Willow Town, dozens of miles away, your vanguard army is surrounded by Marquis. If you return the Great Ming dynasty's captives, Marquis can also let these people go. This is a fair trade. If you don't agree, then there's no need to talk. Marquis will kill you within 3 breaths. After speaking, Yang Qindong gently raised his left hand. This action clearly meant to kill Yeshen. He had already seen the serious consequences of reaching out his left and right hands, so he didn't dare to test the law. He immediately shouted, "Wait, this is such a big matter. No matter what, this chief has to go back and discuss it with his subordinates first. I'm sorry, before all the Great Ming dynasty's captives are released, you can't leave here." Yang Qindong shook his head and said with a look that said, "Don't play tricks, it's useless to think about it." "Are you going to take me as a hostage?" Yeshen said very discontentedly when he heard this. It was just that after saying this sentence he didn't speak anymore. The reality was already like this. Wasn't it too late for him to react now? He couldn't leave and he couldn't beat him. Reality forced Yeshen to agree to Yang Qindong's conditions. However, although he agreed, Yeshen was still a little worried. Would Yang Qindong act shamelessly? Therefore, after hesitating for a while, he raised his head and said, "Loyal Marquis, but I don't know if you will let me go if I release the captives. Also, will you release all the besieged warriors in Walla?" Seeing that Yeshen also wanted to make a request, Yang Qindong said indifferently, "What? Do you think that other than believing in Marquis you have the qualifications to negotiate with Marquis? You." After being said this by Yang Qindong, Yeshen's face changed again and again. It was obvious that he was very angry. Marquis is joking with you. In fact, with your intelligence you can think about it. If Marquis wanted to kill you, why would he talk nonsense with you? As for the captives of the Great Ming, Marquis can bring his army to kill them after killing all of you. Presumably, Walla doesn't have the strength to stop the Great Ming's army now. However, Marquis didn't do this, which is already a kind of sincerity. As for your people who are besieged in Willow Town, I have to trouble you to send someone to inform them not to try to break out of the encirclement. Tell them to stay here obediently and wait for the results of our negotiation. Naturally, they will be released. During this period, if anyone dares to act rashly, they will only die. Don't blame Marquis for not reminding you. Since he had already said this, Yeshen had to accept it even if he didn't want to. However, after thinking about it carefully, Yang Chendong didn't seem to have the intention to destroy Walla. Otherwise he could do it now and Yeshen wouldn't have the strength to fight back. There was no other choice. Yeshen was forced by Yang Chendong's strength and finally lowered his head. He turned around and shouted to the army behind him. He called a few fast horse scouts and arranged them to inform the brothers in Willow Town not to act rashly. In addition, they were to inform the captives of the Great Ming army to escort them back to the loyal Marquis. After the order was given, the scouts left. Yang Chendong smiled and waved his hand. The first guard captain, Chiu Vi, brought people to deliver wine and food to Yeshen. Leader Walla, the night is long and there are too many things to do. Why don't we drink while waiting? Yeshen looked at the wooden table in front of him as well as the hot food and wine. He was even more surprised in his heart. The loyal Marquis of the Great Ming seemed to have calculated everything and knew that he would compromise. He even prepared wine and food. Well, there was nothing to say. Let's eat first. Chapter 214. Willow Town. After Borromeo met up with General Naigong, he tried to charge out a few more times, but they all ended in failure. After many warriors died, the morale of the army began to waver. When faced with the general's order to break out of the encirclement, not many people were willing to go along with it. Charging out despite knowing that they would die wasn't bravery but recklessness. Everyone only had one life. Who was willing to die so carelessly? As they waited and broke out of the encirclement, the sky gradually began to brighten. It also welcomed the scouts sent out by Yeshen. When the scouts arrived and said that their leader didn't want them to break out of the encirclement and to wait in Willow Town, the first to disagree was Borromeo. This time he came with great ambition, but suffered heavy losses time and time again. This made him feel great shame. Seeing that the sky was already bright, the problem that restricted their vision was solved. It was time to charge out, but he was told to stay in place and wait for orders. How could he be willing to accept that? Did my big brother really say that? Does he know that we have already investigated that there are only a few thousand Ming soldiers surrounding us? With our 20,000 soldiers we can definitely charge out. When that time comes, it will be our time of great victory. Borromeo said to the scouts with a face of unwillingness. Unfortunately, these scouts didn't have any status. They were only here to pass on a message. They couldn't give any reply to Borromeo's words. Seeing that the scouts didn't say anything, Borromeo straightforwardly shook his head. You said that my big brother is facing off against the loyal Marquis, right? Good. Say, if you suddenly charge out of Willow Town and come behind the loyal Marquis, do you think you can eliminate him with a pincer attack? If that's the case, will there be anyone in the Great Ming dynasty who dares to oppose the Walla? There shouldn't be anyone. The scouts seemed to have seen some hope as they replied. In reality, the scouts didn't really understand the order this time. However, since their leader had spoken, they had to carry it out. Seeing that the scouts he sent agreed with his suggestion, Borromeo couldn't help but be overjoyed. Good. Since the people sent by Big Brother have agreed, then we will do as this general says. As soon as Borromeo finished speaking, the vanguard general beside him immediately raised a different opinion. We can't do that. The scouts are only there to relay orders. They don't understand the situation on the battlefield at all, so we should listen to the leader. The scouts don't understand the situation on the battlefield, but we do. General Naigong, don't tell me that you've become discouraged and scared after being defeated a few times in one night. You're our Valis general, you should be brave and fearless. Borromeo said with a mocking smile. After being refuted by Borromeo, the general's expression changed again and again. However, he was not good with words and didn't know what to say. In the end, he simply turned his head away and used his actions instead of his mouth to express himself. If you want to disobey, then go ahead. This general will listen to the leader's orders and stay in Willow Town obediently. There were less than 4,000 soldiers left in the original vanguard army, which did not affect the overall situation. Since it didn't make sense, Borromeo decided to just ignore it. He would just lead the army forward. At that time he would kill the Great Ming's loyal Marquis and the credit would be his alone. Perhaps it was because he couldn't wait any longer, or perhaps it was because he wanted to make a contribution, that child Borromeo ignored his elder brother's orders and began to gather his troops. Taking advantage of the darkness of the sky, he headed for the western end of Willow Town and made a counterattack. The sky was already bright. Commander Xiaofeng and Commander Wuxia, who were in charge of guarding here, could also clearly see some of the situation in Willow Town. With the help of binoculars, they could see even further than the enemy. The Walla soldiers in the town suddenly began to gather. This scene was clearly captured by the two of them, and they quickly guessed the enemy's intentions and thoughts. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support at any time. They knew that the Walla cavalry in town outnumbered them by 10 times. For safety reasons, it was also the 6th young master's order to inform Tiger's man to prepare once they discovered something that couldn't be disobeyed. Xiaofeng and Wuxia didn't dare to be careless and quickly made preparations. In less than an hour, the west side of Willow Town suddenly became much more lively. Countless Walla cavalry charged out from here. Borromeo even took the initiative to lead the charge. He wanted to use his actions to inspire the other warriors to charge out of Willow Town and kill the Great Ming's loyal marquis. They're coming out, they're coming out. Everyone get ready. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support. After seeing countless enemies appear in front of their eyes, Xiaofeng and Wuxia both gave military orders to their own cold front soldiers. At the same time, they used the radio communicator to inform Tiger's man that they could fire. After Tiger's man received Xiaofeng and Wuxia's request for reinforcements, he immediately loaded another FG-203mm towed cannon that hadn't fired yet. One of the two FGT-203mm towed cannons was aimed at Yeshin's camp, while the other was aimed at Willow Town. At this moment, Tiger's man received the news and used the second cannon to fire. Borromeo was leading tens of thousands of Walla cavalry to charge out of Willow Town. Under his leadership, the morale of the army increased by a lot. Adding on the fact that they had a large number of people, they seemed to have an unstoppable momentum when they charged out of town. However, this seemingly powerful momentum was met with a hail of bullets from Xiaofeng's 1st Company and Wuxia's 4th Company. Over 100 cavalrymen fell to the ground. However, this momentum didn't seem to have any intention of fading. On the contrary, it became more and more intense. With the continuous charge, more and more Walla cavalry fell to the ground. It was to the point that the path forward was blocked by the corpses of the war horses and soldiers. But in the end, because there were too many cavalrymen, they still managed to charge out. Among the crowd, when Borromeo saw that they had made it out of the town, his face lit up with joy. Holding a saber in his hand, he shouted loudly, a bloodthirsty glint in his eyes. He wanted to charge forward and kill all the Ming soldiers who had heavily injured the Walla cavalrymen, letting them know what it meant to overestimate one's abilities. Seeing the Walla army charging out and getting closer and closer to them, the 3 commanders of the Ming army, Sun Tong Yongjia and Mao Fushou, all had pale faces. Even though they still had 3,000 Ming soldiers under their command, they were all trembling in fear in the face of Walla's army. It looked like they would collapse at any moment. Boom! Just as the Ming army was in chaos and chaos was about to break out at any moment, just as Xiaofeng and Wuxia were shooting with all their might with Lung Feng, the enemy was getting closer and closer due to their disadvantage in numbers. Just as it was extremely dangerous, a loud explosion suddenly sounded above their heads. Following that, a cannonball landed in the middle of Walla's army. The cannonball landed right where the Walla cavalry were most concentrated. With just one cannonball, at least 100 Walla cavalry soldiers were killed. As for the number of people who were injured, it was even more uncountable. Unfortunately, Borromeo was in the crowd. His originally ferocious face was directly swallowed by the cannonball. Not even his bones were left. Borromeo died along with nearly 100 cavalrymen and even more injured people. This cannonball also stunned the advancing Walla cavalry. Before this, they had some understanding of the cannons of the Ming dynasty. However, those cannons could only shoot out a heavy iron ball. The damage it could cause was only in a straight line. As long as they avoided the iron ball that could only attack in a straight line, their lives would not be in danger. How could it be like this cannonball that landed without any warning? Moreover, when it landed under the flames, its lethality was so great that it gave people the feeling that there was no way to avoid it. The people who were stunned by the cannonball reined in their horses and stopped. Borromeo had died in battle. Chapter 215. In the Imperial Palace, Daizong Zhuqiu was pacing back and forth in the throne room. Because he was worried about the battle ahead, he could no longer remain seated on the dragon throne. Standing below were all the fourth-rank officials in the capital and above. They all looked anxious and uneasy, and everyone had a grim expression on their faces. The battle to defend the capital had undoubtedly reached a critical juncture. It would take at least 3 days for the new order to rescue the emperor to arrive at the capital. If the loyal marquis lost to Xian, the entire capital would be in danger and everyone's lives would be in danger. But an entire night had passed and there had been no report from the front line. How could they not be worried? At this moment, many people began to miss the rule of having eunuchs supervise the army. If there were eunuchs present, they would have already sent someone back to report what had happened on the front line. They would not be like this, where everyone could only passively and anxiously wait. The officials had been here since early in the morning, but there was nothing they could do. Some of the officials were unwilling to wait. Seeing that there was nothing they could do, Minister of War Yiming stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet and said, "Your Majesty, should we send someone to the front line to see what the situation is like? No matter what, we have to make preparations early." There were many explanations for what make preparations early meant. If they won, they naturally had to make preparations to celebrate. If they lost, they had to make preparations to flee. That's right, that's right. With Yiming taking the lead, the other officials quickly responded. One by one they stood up and spoke to the emperor. How could Zhou Xian not want to know the situation on the front line? For this reason he had sent out many scouts and spies, but not a single one had returned. At this time he truly didn't know who to send out. On the other hand, Great Eunuch Jin Ying's eyes turned as he thought of something. He carefully took 2 steps forward and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Your Majesty, we can send the embroidered uniform guard commissioner Hu Zhangning and request that he bring back the news." Hu Zhangning? Zhou Qiu's brow creased as he began to think about this person. Zhou Qiu, who had recently spent a lot of time to understand the officials, quickly figured out Hu Zhangning's identity. This person was not only the eldest son of the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao, but more importantly he was also the father-in-law of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, Yang Chendong. The people that had been sent out earlier must have been stopped by Yang Chendong and were not allowed to return. However, if Hu Zhangning were to go and face his father-in-law, he would not be able to stop him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh at how smart Jining was. He immediately turned around and asked the officials, "Is Minister Hu Zhangning here? Your subject is here." When Hu Changning, who was standing behind the officials, heard the emperor's words, he was stunned for a moment. Then he stepped forward with a board in his hand. When the officials saw that the emperor was calling for Hu Zhangning, they quickly opened up a path so that the guardian of the brocade guard could face the emperor directly. "Beloved Minister Hu, we now order you to bring people to the front lines to understand the situation of the battle, then quickly report back. Remember, you must complete this order as quickly as possible. Otherwise you will be severely punished." Zhou Qiu purposely emphasized the word severely, in order to remind Hu Zhangning that it was his son-in-law who was leading the troops into battle. No one would make things difficult for him unless he wanted to make things difficult for himself. Hu Zhangning naturally understood Zhou Qiu's meaning. In his heart he did not want to make things difficult for his son-in-law. However, since he had the emperor's order, he did not dare to disobey. "Your subject obeys the emperor's order. I will definitely go and return quickly." After saying this, Hu Zhangning turned and left the hall. Seeing Hu Zhangning's figure disappear, Zhou Qiu finally let out a long sigh of relief. Presumably, before long there would be a report from the front lines. Hopefully it would be good news. After Hu Zhangning left the palace, he brought along Lieutenant Gao and 2 other Hu family servants and headed straight for the northern side of the capital. Riding at top speed, they arrived at the east side of Willow Town in less than 4 hours. Here they were stopped by a group of Ming soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. In this team there were 2 men in camouflage clothing who looked very energetic. "Who are you? Get off your horse and report your identity." Seeing that there were horses coming from the direction of the capital, the 2 men in camouflage clothing looked at each other and smiled. They had already stopped several groups like this. This was also Yang Chendong's intention. He wanted Zhou Qiu to understand the cruelty of war and make him worried and afraid. If you wanted to make others afraid of you, it was not as simple as beating them up. Sometimes, raising a stick of pressure and not letting it fall would give people a feeling of intimidation. Seeing the Ming army blocking the road, Hu Zhongning, who was leading the group, knew that this should be the Ming army that was fighting against the Walla. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and reported his name. This official is the Imperial Guardian of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, Hu Zhongning. Under the Emperor's orders, I have come to investigate the situation of the battle. You only need to report the truth. What Imperial Guardian? I've never heard of him. Just tie him up as well. The two men in camouflage clothing chuckled. In front of them, the so-called Great Ming army did not have the slightest bit of deterrence. After laughing, they ordered the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office to tie up Hu Zhongning as usual. The Ming army seemed to be used to this kind of thing. They did not even blink as they walked toward Hu Zhongning and the other 3. Although they were Ming soldiers, after witnessing the power of the Cold Guards, they had already submitted to them in their hearts. In addition, they were just carrying out orders. Something happened, they did not have to take any responsibility. There was no need for them to be courteous. They just held the ropes and strode forward. Wait, what are you doing? Do you know who we are? Seeing that the Ming army was about to tie up Hu Zhongning, Lieutenant Gao Xing, who was following by the side, shouted. At the same time, he pulled out the embroidered spring saber at his waist. When they saw Gao Xing pull out the steel saber, a glint of excitement flashed across the eyes of the 2 Cold Guards. They were afraid that the people who came would not resist. If that happened, they would not be able to use their skills. Now, someone actually wanted to play tricks. This was exactly what they wanted. The 2 Cold Guards held 2 pitch-black and cold 95 styles in their hands. One of them had already aimed his gun at the steel saber in Gao Xing's hand. He was confident that he could break the saber with one shot. This way the other party would not be able to resist. Stop. Hu Zhongning had long heard of the power of the advanced firearms in the mercenaries' hands. He did not want to take the risk. He immediately shouted at Gao Xing to stop him from acting rashly. At the same time, he looked at the 2 Cold Guards and said, "Where is Yang Qindong? I am his father-in-law." When they heard someone call out the 6th young master's name, the 2 Cold Guards revealed a cold glint in their eyes. It was as if they were about to attack at any time. However, when they heard the next sentence, they were stunned. This person was actually the father-in-law of the 6th young master. If they really offended him, wouldn't they be severely punished later? At that moment, the 2 of them put down the 95 styles in their hands. One of them was still skeptical as he asked, "Are you really Marquis Yang's father-in-law?" Noticing the change in attitude of the 2 mercenaries, Hu Zhongning let out a long sigh and said proudly, "I'm the real deal. How about this? Call Yang Qindong over and we'll know if it's real or not." Please wait for a moment. We'll call the company commander over. The 2 Cold Guards did not dare to act rashly. However, they would not completely believe the other party's words either. They decided to call the company commander, Ting Shan, over and let him determine if it was real or not. Hu Zhongning and the other 3 did not move. They were surrounded by more than 10 Ming dynasty soldiers. One of the Cold Guards stayed behind and stared at the 4 of them cautiously. From the looks of it, he seemed to be ready to attack at any time. Not long after, Ting Shan, who was also wearing a camouflage uniform but had the insignia of a major, hurried over. Tao Jin, the commander, came with him. As for Commander Gao Li, he stayed behind and was in charge of watching the Walla cavalry in Willow Town to prevent them from making any strange movements. Ting Shan did not know Hu Zhongning. However, he knew that the 6th young master had married Hu Yan as his first wife. This time he brought Tao Jin over so that he could identify the people. Tao Jin was one of the commanders of the 5 cities warden's office. Naturally, he was familiar with all the noble families in the capital. From afar, when he saw that the person who came was indeed Hu Zhongning, he hurriedly cupped his fist and said politely, "So it's Lord Hu. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you." Since Tao Jin had said so, how could it be fake? Ting Shan immediately saluted politely and said, "This subordinate is the commander of the 3rd company of mercenaries. Greetings, Lord Hu." This company commander is too polite. Since the other party's attitude was so respectful, Hu Zhongning naturally greeted him with a smile. Then he asked, "Oh right, why don't I see the loyal Marquis? May I know where he is now?" "Lord Hu, Yang Marquis is not here. He is meeting with the Walla's leader, Yes Hen, at the front line. I don't know what business you have, but if you must meet with Yang Marquis, I will have to report it." Ting Shan said politely. He could ignore other people, but in front of Hu Zhongning he could not put on any airs. Hearing that Yang Chendong was meeting with Yeshen, Hu Zhongning was shocked and asked, "Meeting? Is there any danger?" "There shouldn't be any danger for now, but I don't know the specific situation." Ting Shan shook his head. It was true that Hu Zhongning was the father-in-law of the sixth young master, but he was not a member of the Yang family, so there was no need for him to explain. He did not know the specific situation of Yang Chendong, but when he thought of the strength of the mercenaries and Yang Chendong's ability to plan ahead, Hu Zhongning was not too worried. "I see, but how is the situation now?" "The emperor is waiting for my reply." I don't know the specific situation. But what I can tell Lord Hu is that the Walla's army has been blocked by us outside Willow Town. They will not threaten the safety of the capital." Ting Shan hesitated for a moment and gave a rough explanation. As for the specific situation, without the authorization of the sixth young master, he would not reveal it. Chapter 216. Although he didn't see Yang Chendong, Ting Shan's answer was enough for Hu Zhongning to go back and report on his mission. A satisfied smile finally appeared on his face. Hu Zhongning quickly returned from the capital. He brought back the information he had gathered from the front line and the scouts he had sent out. He also explained in Ting Shan's words that he had no choice but to detain the scouts to prevent anyone from leaking information about the battlefield. He asked for the emperor's understanding. Zhu Qiu was indeed a little angry about the scouts being detained. But when he thought about how he still had to rely on Yang Chendong for the front line, how could he take such a small matter to heart? Especially when he heard Hu Zhongning say that the Walla army had been successfully stopped and that the capital was no longer in danger, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief and laughed with joy. Not only Zhu Qiu, but the other important officials were also very happy when they heard that the capital was no longer in danger. Now they just had to wait for Yang Chendong's triumphant return. At the front line, a large number of Ming captives were sent over. On the Ming army's side, Deputy Chief Yang Guang came forward with 5,000 cavalrymen and was responsible for escorting the captives back to the capital safely. When accepting the captives, Yang Chendong asked the crowd if there were any captives left in the Walla. After receiving the majority's answer that all the captives had been returned, Yang Chendong breathed a sigh of relief. The number of captives received this time was more than 75,000. Most of them were brave soldiers who had been through hundreds of battles. They were just scared out of their wits before, so they couldn't display their full strength on the battlefield. Yang Chendong could imagine that with these 75,000 captives, the safety of the capital would no longer be a problem. Zhu Qizhen could finally sleep without worry. He had successfully completed the important task of protecting the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. As for whether these people would be used by Zhu Qiu to deal with him in the future, Yang Chendong wasn't too worried. Firstly, he had the mercenaries in his hands, so he had to think carefully before making a move. Secondly, these people were all saved by him, so they would have a lot of resistance in their hearts to deal with him. Thirdly, Zhu Qizhen was still in Nanjing, so Dai Zong had to think carefully before making a move against him. With these 3 points, his safety shouldn't be a problem. After dealing with the captives, it was time to release the Walla army and let them leave. This was what worried Yeshen the most. Previously, when he was controlled by someone, he had no choice but to do as Yang Chendong said. Now that the matter was done, would he keep his promise and let's release him and the tens of thousands of Walla cavalry? On this point, Yeshen was a little worried. Everything was as Yang Chendong said before. If he really wanted to deal with the Walla, then he could directly take out a few more cannons from the warehouse. He didn't have to worry about not being able to defeat the Walla, but he didn't do so. He still knew the principle of putting away the bow after the birds are done. If he didn't leave a big enemy for Zhu Qiu, then when he really wanted to deal with him, he would have no scruples. Therefore, when Yang Chendong released more than 20,000 captives from Willow Town and let them join Yeshen, this person was so moved that he cried out. It was no wonder that he did this. The population of the Walla was not large, and there were even fewer young men who could fight. If all the captives were killed this time, then he would really become a commander without an army. He was afraid that when he returned to the grassland, he wouldn't be able to dominate the grassland, and it would be a miracle if he didn't get bullied by others. Seeing that more than 20,000 cavalry had safely retreated, when he looked at Yang Chendong, Yes Hen said in a very admiring tone. Marquis of the Great Ming, you are a real man. You do what you say, which is admirable. If you are willing, the two of us can join forces. At that time, no one in the Great Ming will be our opponent. At that time, there will be gold, silver, treasures, and beautiful women for us to choose from. Isn't that better? Yes Hen invited sincerely, and Yang Qindong's face showed a smile. Leader Yes Hen, there is not only one Great Ming in the world. There are many countries and ethnic groups and places that we don't know about. Why do you only want to deal with the Great Ming? Yang Qindong's answer made Yes Hen stunned. He didn't expect such an answer. He lowered his head, and after hesitating for a moment he raised his head and said, as you said, this world may be very big, but we can't even deal with the Great Ming. How can we talk about other grand plans? Oh no. Yang Qindong stretched out his right index finger and made a shaking motion. As the leader of the Walla, you must first have confidence in your captives. With them you can achieve something. As for why you can't take down the Great Ming, it is because your strength is too weak. There is an old saying in the Central Plains, and I will give it to you here. To forge iron you must be strong. Without enough strength, you can't achieve anything just by relying on the other party's mistakes. To forge iron you must be strong. Yes Hen thought about this sentence thoughtfully. Yes, that's right. Walla doesn't lack soldiers who are brave enough to risk their lives. Your living environment and conditions made your men very brave at a very young age. On the battlefield they can gallop everywhere. But do you know why they still failed? Yang Qindong nodded and guided Yes Hen. Why did they fail? This question was also what Yes Hen wanted to ask. Because your own ability to produce blood is insufficient. If you rely on robbing, this kind of ethnic group is destined to not go far. Yang Qindong chuckled and continued, you lack all kinds of resources. You are complacent when you get something and your ambition is satisfied. Since you are satisfied, you are not far away from the days when you lose. This is why, although the Walla army is brave and can do some earth-shattering things from time to time, it can't escape the fate of being destroyed and replaced by others. In the end, it is because you can't win the hearts of the people. The reason you can't win the hearts of the people is because the people are not rich. They follow you, but in the end they can't even fill their stomachs. Who would really risk their lives? On the other hand, if the country is rich and the people are strong, it means that someone wants to deal with you. In order to ensure the fruits of their victory, they have no choice but to take out their weapons and fight with their lives. One is spontaneous, the other is forced. Tell me, which one is more effective? Rich and the people are strong? Yes Hen was shocked by Yang Qindong's words. It was not that he didn't think about some things here, but he didn't know how to do it. Now that Yang Qindong brought up this problem, he should have a solution. Yes Hen said excitedly. The Ming dynasty's loyal marquis, but I don't know if there is a way to solve this problem? Of course there is. That is to develop commerce. The grassland is only rich in livestock. The natural environment makes you have a great demand for many other things. If they could start a business, then not only could they be self-sufficient, they could also sell their surplus to other places and earn a profit from the difference in price. They could also trade with people from other regions for things they needed. In short, they could earn more money and gradually Tile would become stronger. Once you have money, you will be able to do a lot of things. At that time it will be much easier for you to expand again. Whether it is money or cavalry, you will be in an invincible position. When Yang Qindong said this, he seemed to have seen some kind of result. His face was full of excitement. At that time, the Tatars will not be a stumbling block for your expansion. On the contrary, they will become your base, the base of talent reserves. When you need soldiers, you can use a lot of gold and silver to make them work for you. In the north of your country there is a country called Tsarist Russia. I think you should more or less know about it. That country is vast and rich in resources. Its area is much larger than the Ming dynasty, but its population is very small. That is the place you need to conquer. Remember Genghis Khan? Don't you want to be like your ancestors? A majestic strategic map was placed in front of Yes Hen. After Yang Qindong said this, his heart was suddenly moved. He was like a person in the dark who saw the light, a person in a desperate situation who saw hope. It made Yes Hen feel like he was reborn. Can we really do this? When he returned to reality, Yes Hen said with some uncertainty. Why can't we do it? The reason why the Ming dynasty has such a vast land and the prosperity of the people is the result of trade. If this is the case, why can't the Walla do it? Yang Qindong did not answer directly. Instead he asked Yes Hen a question in a rhetorical way. Yes Hen could not answer this question, but he could continue to ask questions. So, does the loyal Marquis want the Walla and the Ming dynasty to stop attacking each other and resume trade? No. Yang Qindong shook his head. It is to establish trade with Marquis. This time I'll be the one providing you with the goods. It won't be as simple as before, where I'll set up a horse farm to exchange for the goods you need with the Central Plains people. Instead you will use silver to buy the goods I provide at a low price. Finally, through your hands you will sell them at a high price. At that time you will find that doing this will allow you to earn more silver. Then you will be able to buy more things and do more things. In the end, Yang Qindong revealed his purpose. At the end of the day, Yang Qindong wanted to sell his goods and earn more silver to develop himself. At the same time he wanted to increase his reputation. If he were to do the business himself, the speed would be too slow and the risk would be too great. If he really sent the Lung Feng to protect him, he did not know how much manpower he would have to put in. This was not proportional to what he would gain. At least for now, there were not many Lung Feng, so he could not split himself up. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.